In Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning and happy Friday to you. This is Alex Phillips keeping you company on the airwaves until 1 o'clock today to chew over today's news and throw in some views and hopefully try to cast away those blues just ahead of the weekend in what I like to call, and I know you're waiting for me to say it, a bit of communal catharsis today where we can all get together and sing a kind of misanthropic kumbaya so we can sort of rid ourselves of the pain and the burden of all of the horrors of 2025 before we kick our heels up and have a well-deserved drink or two this weekend. Of course, this process, getting on the sort of shared therapist couch, also involves you, so you need to know how you can be part of that. Well, it's very simple, really. You just pay your normal network rate to dial this number, 03444991000, and Alicia's sitting there waiting to take your call, and when the time is right, she will put you through to the studio and we can talk about all of the things going on today. Get it off your chest. Let us know how you would solve the crises of the 21st century. 03444991000 is also the number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed, if you would rather, you can leave me a little voice note on WhatsApp by holding down the microphone and waxing lyrical about whatever you wish. 8722 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message, if there's some of you out there that still do that. And actually, judging by the incoming, there are a lot of you. If you go down that route, you've got to write the word talk before you send your text message. That way, it doesn't get stuck in limbo with, sort of flying babies' heads with little wings, not quite knowing what their destiny is. It actually makes its way down the pipelines of our aerial system, the masts on top of Talk Towers, and pings me in the studio, appearing on my screen in front of me. That is also charged at your normal rate. We're on X at talkTV. So throughout the programme, keep me company today. I could do with the moral support. And if you haven't messaged or phoned before, because we haven't had people who we speak to quite a lot, if you haven't done it before and have always been tempted but never quite had the courage, I'll make it very easy for you. I'll be very gentle. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a phone call. It's like speaking to someone at the, checkout or in the pub. It's just me. It's Alex. Not scary. OK, right. Well, I don't know. Some people might disagree with that. But let's go now to former Conservative government advisor, one of my besties, Mr. James Price, to talk about the big political news stories of the day. Good morning to you, James.
How are you? And in your honour, Alex, I'm wearing, after the late May bank holiday has the best tradition possible, the Gloucester cheese roll, and I can see it's like a big, beautiful cheese there. My cheese rolling jumper, where you can see the O is running away from the role there.
Oh, now I see it. Now I see it. Oh, did you go this weekend? Do you know, once again, another weekend where I wasn't in Gloucester for the bank holiday, enjoying that.
It is completely bonkers, and that once people are finished watching your show for the next few hours, maybe in an ad break, should go and look at some of the ridiculous videos of people hurtling themselves down the almost vertical slope after a nice wheel of double Gloucester cheese.
It's almost like an allegory for the state of our government right now, it seems to me. Now let's talk about what is going on in politics, because a little gap has opened up for Kemi Badenoch to finally have some sort of political identity, because Nigel Farage is taking Sir Keir Starmer to task over the cap on child support, landing at 2 children. He says that cap should be lifted altogether. He did stress in his speech that this isn't for new arrivals who want to come and enjoy the perks of the British benefit system, but for native Brits themselves to enter a period of pronatalism, to encourage people who are struggling to have children or might like to expand their family but feel they can't afford it, to get on with the job, a la Hungary. There has, of course, been an internal battle in the Labour Party over this, whether that cap should be lifted or not, and Kemi Badenoch has come out quite stridently and said that it's a dreadful idea and that it's a race to the bottom, and says the Conservatives are now the only serious party of sound money. Not sure the voters are quite going to believe that one, but what's your take on this?
It's always comforting for me as a Conservative to be able to wholeheartedly agree with Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the party. I think she's exactly right. I think despite the Conservatives' doldrums in the polls, they're still seen as the party most trusted on the economy. And every time I get tempted by reform, they come out and say some of these policies I just think are completely mad. Look, I do agree with Nigel Farage that we have a big problem of declining birth rates, not just in Britain or Europe, but right across the West. And actually, frankly, the stats show out that everywhere apart from sub-Saharan Africa, there are some states of India that have a lower, what they call TFR, total fertility rate, than we do in Britain. So we're having this problem right across the world. The answer, though, I don't think is to release this or reduce this 2-child benefit cap. What we've got is a structural set of problems where people are either not encouraged to have kids because of a lack of belief in the future and in their own country, but also economic problems where housing is so expensive, we're taxed so damn heavily all the time, childcare is incredibly expensive, and motherhood in general is sort of looked down upon as not being something that a girl boss should be into doing. And those are the things to tackle, because otherwise it's people who, working really hard, paying lots of tax, who want to have children, are going to end up being taxed to subsidise people who aren't working and can't afford to have the extra children they're having, and they're already on benefits that are paid for by people who work hard. That can't be right, surely.
I mean, maybe it is a bit of a relief to Kemi Badenoch, considering the polling of the Conservative Party of late has looked rather like, you know, sort of echocardiogram where there are some serious problems going on. That actually maybe it's a relief to her that Farage has sort of tacked over to the left wing economically, because it does offer her an opportunity to give her party back a bit of identity.
Yeah, absolutely right. The Conservatives have long been the party seen as best on the economy. I think the big problem with that is this idea that you could ever take the economy as separate from anything else. If you don't have a strong economy, you can't have a strong military. If you don't have a decent economy, you can't have good schools or good hospitals. You've got no money, you can't fix the potholes, you can't send back illegal immigrants and have strong law and order. So it's all tied together, and that's why I think it could be a bit of a silver bullet for the Tories to reclaim that mantle. And we know from history, whether it's the Thatcherite revolution in the 80s, that, by the way, Tony Blair kept most of that good stuff. It happened again in America. And frankly, when free markets and capitalism are supported and tried, they work everywhere around the world. We know that works. And again, it's why I'm so concerned with Nigel Farage's attempt to move to the left on this. It's not just about trying to steal votes from Labour. It's about what would be the right countries to get this country out of the deep problems that it's in. And whilst I like a lot of reforms ideas on cultural and social issues, if they screw up the economy, they're never going to have the chance to fix anything should they ever get into power.
Now, let's focus again on this move to the left and the way that Sir Keir Starmer is handling it, because yesterday, and we'll watch a clip in a second, but I mean, this extraordinary press conference, which seemed to be called in honour of Nigel Farage. Let's listen to a bit of it.
Do you think one of the problems is that Nigel Farage can approximate talking like a human being, where you just resort to talking points and dodging questions.
The speed of the decline in your popularity is historically unprecedented. Isn't this speech today an admission that you have failed and Nigel Farage understands voters better than you?
Nigel Farage has 5 MPs, you've got 403. Are you panicking because Reform is so far ahead in the polls, it seems? Is he living rent-free in your brain? You went to a state school, your dad worked in a factory, your mum worked in the NHS, so why has a public school-educated former city trader got more in common with the Red Wall than you have?
Reform UK say you're running scared of them, that you're sounding increasingly like them with some of the policies and announcements you've made recently. This is a speech that was very defensive, wasn't it? Are you not worried people will ask why you're holding a press conference about Nigel Farage 4 years out from a general election instead of focusing on your plans for the country?
You went into the election promising to freeze national insurance and keep the two-child benefit cap. You've since raised national insurance on businesses and now you're considering axing the cap. Isn't attacking Nigel Farage's economic credibility a bit rich?
I mean, there you go. That was basically a wonderful little montage of some of the questions faced by Sir Keir Starmer in what I can only really describe, and I'm going to create a neologism here, as some sort of mallow hagiography for the Reform UK leader. It's almost like some sort of dedicated event to everything Nigel may have said or done, which is supposed to basically skewer him, but instead, I think, had kind of the opposite effect.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch this, isn't it? What's the phrase the kids say? Nigel Farage is living rent-free inside Keir Starmer's head. And it reminded me a bit of a clip in The Simpsons. Right? Just stop, he's already dead, stop. Because I almost felt sorry for Starmer having to take that barrage of questions there. As someone said, I think it was it Chris Hope, that if you've got 400-odd MPs, you've got all this unlimited, supposedly, control and power over the government to enact your agenda. Why are you worrying about a party that's only got 5 MPs? It does show how scared they are of the potential of Reform coming in the next election. Of course, it's a very long way away, and my concern, as I say, is that if Reform don't get the economics right, and they get elected just out-labouring Labour on economics, that would be an absolute snatching of defeat from the jaws of victory. So I hope that sort of sound business voices and kind of capitalist ideas in the Reform Party policy mix win out over some of these slightly knee-jerk reactions just to kind of own the Labour Party. I don't think that's the way to help get the country out of the problem, even if I agree that destroying Labour and destroying socialism is exactly what we do need.
Do you think Starmer successfully landed any blows, though? Because I watched that whole thing sniggering, quite frankly, especially when he turned around and was saying about, oh, well, I went up to Jaguar Land Rover, Nigel Farage said they could go broke, he didn't care. Well, everyone watching it was like, well, that's the whole go woke or go broke. It was about an advert. He wasn't actually saying he'd like Jaguar Land Rover to close down. And I felt like every single sort of punch he tried to land just completely missed the target.
Yeah, you're dead right. And I've got to say, by the way, I'm torn between you and Mike Graham for the best Keir Starmer impression there. That was pretty good.
Oh, thanks. Been working on it.
But you're right. I think that they haven't got the kind of the software update to know how to deal with it. Labour have been attacking the Tory party for so long that that's all the attack lines they've got. And those didn't work very much because, frankly, it was Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives that lost the last election rather than Labour actually really winning it, except by default. And so they thought they had this idea in their head that the Tories are evil, and therefore when they get into power, they'll just stop the evil and everything will be wonderful and the sun will shine and the economy will grow and all the little children and farmyard animals will be smiling and dancing around under a rainbow, right? Then they realise it's actually a bit more complicated than that, and that they have got no ideas themselves and are totally useless. And just as their heads are spinning from that, they've got this insurgent force of reform, and they're trying all the old magical spells and incantations. Oh, he's a posh boy, he went to a posh school, he's from the city, and none of it works. It's bouncing off like Teflon because people don't care about where you're from or any of this stuff. It's what the left don't get about this identity.
But it's also a case of presentation, isn't it? I mean, what was so staggering was that question of, Nigel Farage speaks human and you just speak robot, basically, which is true. I watched that press conference and Starmer sort of looking this way, looking that way, talking, looking this way. And I was like, he's using those sort of invisible auto cues. You can tell he cannot connect with the public. Every single question he asked, he just gave an answer he wanted to give. He never addressed the tougher questions, and you compare that to the Reform UK conference, the press conference a few days before, where Nigel Farage, when asked a question by the journalist, would get his glass and go, right, you started this, and bam, gave an answer, that he's able to directly communicate. And I just think if I was advising Starmer, I would say, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase a line in Italian here, which is don't poke the turd. I was once taught this brilliant Italian phrase, which basically means if there's a problem, stop pointing at it, stop highlighting it. You're gonna make it get worse.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's definitely true if you're in power, right? And this is what the Conservatives did wrong last time round, and I've tried to exhort fellow Conservatives never to do this again, that talking right and then governing left, as you said, don't highlight things if you're not actually going to go and fix it. That's why I think what Robert Jenrick from the Conservatives did was so great, which was quitting the last Conservative government, because he was highlighting, look, you're not actually serious about getting immigration under control, and he quit as a result of it. And if you want to talk about people's good communication skills, Rob Jenrick yesterday, whilst this Labour reform fight was going on, Robert Jenrick was running around a tube station in London, accosting fare dodgers and dobbing them into the police. It was absolutely fantastic.
I mean, I must admit that one, we're going to be talking about that later, but that one was a new chapter in politics. You know, you've got Ed Davey on his jet skis, and now you've got vigilante Jenrick. It's like, what is going on? And I just want to talk now in terms of what is going on. Lord Hermer. Okay, so this is because yesterday Lord Hermer spoke to RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, basically a big foreign affairs think tank, about the Tories and Reform, talking about quitting the ECHR, and compared them to Nazis, calling them reckless and dangerous. And he said that basically it reflects a particular individual in the Nazi party who started criticising, Carl Schmitt is his name, that started criticising things such as international law before, guess what, Hitler comes into power and starts invading everything. And people have said, what are you on? You know, put down the pipe, son, or watch what you're putting in it, because this is not, I mean, this is our Attorney General saying stuff like this.
A way to wipe a smile off my face mentioning this chap Hermer. Honestly, this is the guy who is the driving force behind the final Chagos Islands sell-off. It's a man I'm going to just come out and say I think is a traitor who hates Britain, who hates all of our traditions.
But on that, I'm going to interject here, because on the tube this morning where I had snatches of signal, I did a bit of Hermer Googling, didn't I? And I've cut my little list of Hermer factoids. He's the first Attorney General to have not been in politics before in a century. So normally you get someone who's a lawyer who actually knows how politics and running a country and governance works. Not this guy. No, he's just Starmer's old chum from the Doughty Chambers, his best mate with the same far-left extremist ideologies. And what's worse is this guy used to be a big donor to Sir Keir Starmer. So talk about giving jobs to the boys. And when you look at the trendy leftist viewpoints that Lord Hermer has, you can basically fill up the woke bingo card, can't you? Like you said there, he was the one pushing for the Chagos Islands to be sent to Mauritius for some sort of mad anti-colonial attitudes. He's helped Caribbean governments advise them on how they could push for slavery reparations. He's defended Jerry Adam. He calls Just Stop Oil inspiring. He said that all education secretaries should have to learn about the impacts of the British Empire and how evil it was. He hates British exceptionalism, unless that is indeed that Britain is exceptionally evil and bad. He's defended Al-Qaeda terrorists. He campaigned to bring Shamima Begum back home. He also was the one, wait for this, who oversaw the prosecution of the rioters. He's the one who set up that whole tiny little affair with the televised trials and sending people like Lucy Connolly to prison for hurty tweets. The man who is just Starmer's chum from his chambers and his former donor, knows nothing about politics, knows nothing about realpolitik, and is the most woke leftist moron that you can find. He's not fit for purpose.
There's nothing I can improve on that. That was a perfect rant, and I completely agree. But this guy has this amount of power, and he's got the gall to start calling his opponents Nazis. You know, there's a rule of the internet, which is the longer an argument on the internet goes on, the likelihood of someone accusing someone else of being a Nazi basically rises to a complete certainty. And it's a surefire way to lose any argument. Are the Canadians Nazis? They're not in the ECHR. Are the Australians Nazis? Are the Kiwis Nazis? No, this is just complete and utter rot. And worse than that, it's brain rot. And this idea of going back to someone like Carl Schmitt, who I think I've seen some academics point out that Hermer is actually misrepresenting some of these ideas anyway. Why didn't he use a good British philosopher like Thomas Hobbes, who talked about the importance of power, or someone like Thucydides, who, when talking about the Peloponnesian Wars between Athens and Sparta 2,400 and something years ago, was talking about different ideas of political legitimacy and power. It's a perfectly respectable long tradition, and he just decides to tramp all over that, showing himself up to be a complete ignoramus on top of that very long rap sheet of charges against him, and calling his opponents Nazis. And it's just childish. These are the people that are in charge of us.
It's not, but it ain't childish, is it? When it actually ends up with those prosecutions of, people who wrote 30 words on social media during the so-called riots. It's not just sort of playground politics when you're handing away sovereign British territory to an ally of China. And my feeling about this, if the boot was on the other foot, okay, if Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss had made one of their besties with very Brexity viewpoints, the Attorney General, who then started pointing at everything going on and accusing everybody of being Leninists and Stalinists and being a real danger to society, and, demanding that we sort of break international law at every second turn, there would be outrage in the press, particularly if that person had found to be once upon a time a donor to the cause. The media, the legacy media would be saying this is corrupt, this is institutionalized. It's just, I just don't understand how nobody is digging into this man and going, how on earth, with the jobs for the boys, is he sitting there in this position of prestige harming the country?
Yeah, you're completely right. This does not pass the infamous smell test, does it? Absolutely not. I think it's also, I can't even bear to talk about this particular individual anymore, but it's part of a wider problem, isn't it? That the rule of law has been overtaken and subverted by the rule of lawyers, and that you get these people that like to pick on one very technical point of something or other to try and invalidate a whole argument. And I think that what they want us to do is to conflate present laws with things that are morally right. And the point of being in Parliament is to change laws. So this idea that they're ever, completely immutable is wrong. We can all point to laws in the past that were wrong. I suggest anything that Labour is doing now is some of that. But it's just missing the wood for the trees. As Cicero once said, the more laws, the less justice. And I think that we should stop paying such homage and praying down before lawyers like this, who use the law, who weaponize it, this idea of warfare, to attack their political opponents. Say, well, you actually can't say that because I'm a very fancy lawyer. People like Jolly and Maugham, who try and take people's money to do these spurious court cases. And this idea of judicial reviews that try and stop any government action at all. No, stop all this. Let's have politicians be held accountable for their actions.
It just seems to me a lot of these leftist lawyers are on a massive ego trip at the expense of the nation. James Price, thank you ever so much. Come on, leaving the ECHR akin to the Nazis. The ECHR is no longer fit for purpose. And in fact, actually, to prove that point, there are now 9 member states of the EU all pushing actually to close certain chapters of the ECHR, saying it is holding us back, it's posing security threats. We can't do things that we need to do for our country because this unelected court in Strasbourg is demanding that we do things that are basically gamed by terrorists and ne'er-do-wells. And then you've got these idiots like Hermer going, oh, we love the ECHR international. No! When law isn't fit for purpose, you get rid of it, right? There used to be a law that you could throw gay people in prison. Guess what? We changed it. You can change laws. That is what's supposed to happen. And when it comes to this law that you can't change up at the ECHR, where they make mad rulings in favour of not deporting terrorists and bringing back ISIS soldiers, then I would think, actually, if you're going to stand up in front of a Foreign Affairs Institute, a Foreign Affairs think tank, and tell them how the world should be run, you should do your homework first. Huh? Right. We're going to take a break now, but when I come back, I'm going to be reading some of your messages and hopefully speaking to some of you. If you would like to do that, the number is 0344 499 1000. It's your normal network rate. So pick up the blower now and get in touch. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number on text messages. Remember to write the word talk before you text. Sounds like a sort of primary school warning, doesn't it? Talk before you text. We're on X at talkTV. I am back after this.
In the wake of the Southport attack, we were being fed the line that this was a Welsh choir boy from Cardiff who'd committed the atrocity. Well, that kind of nonsense has got to stop. And if the police, Merseyside police, have learnt their lessons from last summer, then great big tick. Because it's time that the police stopped treating the public with contempt. You can't get away with it anymore, Mike. Not in this digital age where everybody is a citizen journalist.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, before we get on with getting on, I'm going to let you know about your chance to win FIFA World Cup final tickets. That's correct. World Cup final tickets. And that's thanks to our friends at DAZN. Well, here's everything you need to know.
Hi, it's Jim White here. Here at talkSport, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We'll sort flights, accommodation, and give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you like. 18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. All you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338 by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on June the 18th.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, come now, that is a pretty cool competition, isn't it? World Cup final tickets and 5k in your pockets. Don't miss out. Good luck. Now, let's do some messages and then let's hit up the phone lines as promised. Patrick Quinn, Daniel Patrick Quinn. Oh, I love it. I've got a middle name in there. In Caithness says, looking forward to a great show as ever. Well, let's see how I'm doing. Cheese rolling is all very well and good. Well, it is. But nothing on the Berryman in South Queensferry near Edinburgh. Every second Friday in August, and nobody really knows when or why the tradition started. I wrote a song about it once. Well, okay, so that's great, but I still don't know what the berry man is. I mean, does anyone out there? Cheese rolling, that's almost... I was watching a programme the other night from Australia, and there was one of the characters in there was talking about training up to go and do this quintessential niche English sport of tossing yourself down a vertical slope after a double Gloucester. Born and bred in Gloucester, of course, and barely ever go to the cheese roll. But it's one of those special occasions. They've banned it. Oh, they've banned it on numerous occasions because of health and safety, but people still lob themselves down after a piece of cheese anyway. You can't stop a nutter being a nutter, especially a West Country nutter. Good morning, Alex, and happy Cider Day. Friday, says Mike in Lincoln, after the press appear to have rounded on our worse than useless Prime Minister Starmer after his reform attack presser yesterday. Do you think he'll go into a hiding and avoid them from now on? We can but hope, eh? Well, no, I don't want Starmer to go into hiding. I want him to keep doing those press conferences because it gives me a lot of fun to talk about them, to watch them. It just seems mad. I can't imagine any other leader standing there and doing a press conference about another leader. It was weird. Like, what are you doing there, son? It's almost like he wants Nigel to get more popular because he just wants to throw the towel in and go back to, I don't know. He'll probably go and be some ECHR judge or something, won't he? I'd love it over there. Oh, look at this. Neil sent me a poem. I do like a bit of verse. There was once a robot called Starmer who wasn't a natural charmer. Along came Farage like a welcome mirage. Now Starmer is getting his karma. I like that. That's very good. Little limerick there. Well done to you. Let's speak now to Tarquin, who's in London. Hello there, Tarquin. Good morning.
Alex, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm sort of, ticking on.
Say, that rant that you did about 5 10 minutes ago was just stellar. It was amazing. You're just so sharp, and you're an absolute credit. I know Kevin's me a bromance. I have a bromance with Kev, but top drawer stuff, honestly, and that's what's made me have to phone in, because I was so livid for what you and your colleague was just saying about these lawyers.
Yeah.
I think when common sense prevails, and it will, and it must, I want to see total accountability of all these lawfare merchants that have been slid themselves into our constitution, committing constitutional vandalism. I want to see accountability so that, and here's the corollary, that it can never happen again.
Right. Some of these leftist lawyers, it almost reminds me of Henry VIII and the Great Schism leaving the ECHR, when Henry VIII said, I'm fed up with the Vatican telling me whose head I can chop off and who I'm allowed to marry. I'm out. We're going to make up our own morality. In fact, I'm just going to invent the Church of England. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of that's going on at the moment, and that essentially people like Lord Hermer represent every other interest but the British interest. He seems to have made a fortune taking taxpayers' money, defending the indefensible by and large. And look, in our legal system, everybody has the right to attorney, and I would support that until my dying breath. But it's funny, isn't it, that older Hermer, once donor to Sir Keir Starmer, his chum from the Doughty Chambers, seems to always be on the side of those who are against the government. Why? He just hates this country. And I'm fed up with these people. He's got no political experience. It's just a, T-crosser, I-dotter, wokist, who all of these things that he's deciding and fighting for, they don't impact his life in his leafy suburb with his 8-bedroom house and his little kids are at private school or whatever. They don't affect him when he decides that a rapist should be allowed to stalk the streets of Bradford. It doesn't affect him when he's banging on about paying reparations. All right, you want the Caribbean to have reparations? Why don't you dig deep into your own money? Because that's taxpayer funded. You could repatriate that, couldn't you? You could refool your own earnings in the British taxpayer and yourself single-handedly be the reparations payer if you feel that strongly about it. But also, why on earth are the media not going? This man was giving money to Starmer. He's his mate from his old law firm with no political experience. Why is he in that job?
Exactly, but it's clearly nepotism, conflict of interests right the way down the line there. The fact that this can be allowed to happen in 2025 is insane. When it comes to corporate governance, this conflict of interest of segregation of duties and all other good stuff in the corporate governance codes would rule this stuff out. The fact that it goes on into this nebulous area of politics where you can create a so-called manifesto, which is nothing worth a bit of bog pay because they wipe their art, you know what I mean?
Well done, you stopped yourself saying that word just in time.
Just in time, nice save. And but I think the thing is about it, what we're seeing, what with the attack on Nigel Farage yesterday by Starmer, is that They're out of bullets. They're all out of bullets.
They are. It's done. To do my impression, I did an impression of Starmer earlier, so let's do an impression of Nigel. It's done. It's gone. It's done. Anyway, thank you ever so much, Tarquin. Fantastic call there. Now, before I have a little well-deserved break where I get to wet my whistle and pump the caffeine directly into my veins, let me tell you about a little side hustle I've been working on. A side hustle which, of course, me being me, takes place in the pub. Have a look at this.
Trump's victory doesn't signal the end of woke. It shows that it's happening. And we know that he won on an anti-woke ticket, quite explicitly. I mean, the Future Forward think tank, which is a Democratic Party think tank, no fans of Trump, right? They admitted that that advert that his campaign produced about Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. That was the slogan, because Kamala Harris had been talking about how we need to provide transitional surgery for prisoners. And so he had this brilliant slogan, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. And this group, Future Forward, found that among people who saw that advert, it actuated a 2.7-point tilt towards Trump, which is a huge swing. That's a hugely effective advertisement campaign. And it was an anti-woke thing. But that was
Well, that was me. You could hear off screen was me not just enjoying my beer, but wholeheartedly agreeing with the things that Andrew Doyle was saying. Because I've been started this little series where once a week I drag the great and the good of right-wingery, well, it doesn't have to be right-wingery, down to the pub for a couple of jars where we really chew into topics. We go deep, deeper than you've ever seen. We go Joe Rogan deep. That's right. And that is about to land on YouTube at the end of this programme. So if you hadn't had enough of 3 hours of me whittering away inside this little box, you can then go onto YouTube and watch me whittering away in a pub instead. But like I said, it's sort of very relaxed, detailed conversation where we explore topics in the sort of way that you don't get to do when Ted, the producer in my ear, is yelling at me to go to advert break, which is what I'm going to have to do right now. But don't go anywhere, because when I come back, we're going to be talking about the sheer waste of the civil service after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, the civil service. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of talented, hard-working men and women in the civil service running this country and being the marionettes of pretty useless, toothless politicians who, quite frankly, couldn't organise a pee-up in the proverbial. But they're constantly under attack, aren't they? I mean, Dominic Cummings, back when he was Boris Johnson's advisor, was all for draining the swamp a la Trump 1.0. Well, we've now learned that the civil service is spending more than £27 million of taxpayers' money on equality, diversity and inclusion initiatives, and that's in just 1 year alone. And also more than 80,000 civil service jobs should be scrapped, apparently, to save the taxpayer £5 billion a year. That's analysis by right-wing think tank Policy Exchange, who basically says there's way too much dead weight, it costs us way too much money. I just say bring back Demon Headmaster Jacob Rees-Mogg to scour the offices looking for the people in their slankets back at home not pulling their weight. Anyway, let's speak now to David Penman, who is the General Secretary of the FDA Union. David, great to have you on the programme. Let's start off, first of all, with this DEI stuff. Now, I'm sure you're going to be banging the drum, supporting and representing the civil service as you should be doing. But really, do we need to have 570 diversity networks, 2,965 committee members, and an annual spend of 27 million quid to sort of punt the civil service full of what is now fast becoming outmoded and divisive doctrine?
So if you look at that figure, £27 million, you're talking about a civil service of more than 500,000 people with a wage bill, as you've said, of about somewhere between 20 and £25 billion. Now, the idea that £27 million is this huge waste when you're dealing with over 250 organisations, trying to make sure that the civil service looks like the country that it serves, that where there is discrimination, where there are challenges and issues about how it operates or individuals operate, that it operates fairly, is not a huge amount of money to spend on that. So I don't think actually that's quite extraordinary. Nigel Farage said yesterday he's going to save back £5 billion from scrapping D&I. The reality of it is the spend on diversity and inclusion is relatively small for the size of the civil service and helps make sure the civil service is the sort of service people can be proud of.
The thing is this, though, with DEI, a lot of people are saying that this stuff does more harm than good. That it, at the very least it wastes time and money. And £27 million, I agree, are coins down the back of the sofa when it comes to the annual Treasury bill. But, you know, if I had done my sums before coming in here, I probably could have told you that £27 million would get us X amount of doctors and nurses, or able to build this many sort of, I don't know, extra prison spaces. All these things where we find that we're sort of splitting at the seams, our public services are under great strain. 27 million quid is still 27 million quid. But the other problem is this. I mean, the civil service are there to basically decide, or no, not decide, they shouldn't be deciding things. They're supposed to be aiding and abetting politicians in enacting manifestos and putting into practice the laws that those politicians propose. Why on earth should they be doing things like joining up LGBT charity Stonewall, who are making political demands? I mean, it's if anything, it has the risk of contradicting government policy, this stuff. And it's very, you know, since Trump got elected, people are turning around and speaking openly about this DEI rot and saying that it's actually very divisive and very damaging. We could just get rid of it, can't we?
Well, if you want an organisation that doesn't really care about whether it's equal or not, whether everyone has a fair chance, or when there are problems or someone experiences discrimination, it doesn't matter, then of course you can get rid of DEI, but that doesn't make for good organisations. The civil service should be the sort of place where everyone, regardless of their background or their colour or their gender, can thrive and do a good job. That's how you get the best people delivering for the taxpayer. And that means at times things go wrong and there are challenges, and organisations, every organisation, particularly big ones, have to address those sorts of problems, both individually when it comes to someone's experiences or structurally.
But surely, like anywhere else, there's an HR department and there's employment law, and if you're discriminated against, then take it to a tribunal. I don't know why everyone has to sit there and start sort of self-flagellating over the idea that, you know, Britain was once an evil empire.
But that's not the experience of what's going on in the civil service, and that's not what these people are doing. These people are part of the HR network. They are specialists who deal with equality. They will advise on policy. They will help support HR when it comes to complex and difficult cases. That's the sort of work that they're doing. You're talking about 500 people out of an organisation of more than 500,000 that are working on this particular area. It is not extraordinary. All big organisations, private sector and public sector, will have HR experts and equality experts to help ensure that the best people get on in an organisation and an organisation treats its staff fairly.
Let's move on now to this idea that 80,000 civil service jobs should be scrapped to save taxpayers £5 billion a year. Now, this is a report done by right-wing think tank Policy Exchange, which shows that in Whitehall now, staff used to be 380,000 and has jumped up to 514,000 since 2016. So in less than 10 years, you've got a massive increase of basically 150,000 staff members in 10 years. Why? Why are these extra jobs? Are they really needed, or could we look at a slimmed down civil service?
I think no one would look at the civil service now and think that it has grown in a planned and organised way. And I think there's some good analysis in this think tank. I would argue that it's not a right-wing think tank, Policy Exchange. I think they do some good work and a broad spectrum of views from it. And the report itself looks at that, the kind of chaos of the last 10 years and what's happened and why the civil service has grown the way that it has done. If you look at those 10 years, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had 6 prime ministers, 8 chancellors.
And we need 150,000 extra people to deal with those things.
And 40 different finance ministers. We've in most government departments, there's a football team of ministers who've been in charge.
Well, how many football teams? It's 150,000 extra staff. That's a lot.
I would use the analogy like Chelsea's a football club. If you keep changing direction and keep changing policy and keep changing managers, it's very inefficient. And the civil service has grown inefficiently. The challenge really is, how do we go from here? The disagreement I would have with this report is that it just creates these arbitrary numbers, slash 20% here, 40% there. The reality of it is, if you want to address the efficiencies in government, you need long-term planning and you need stable government and you need to match commitments to resources. What do we want to achieve? What do we want public services to look like? What are the resources that are needed to do that? And how do you come up with a plan to go from where we are now to where we are then? That's not by just drawing a line in the sand and saying 20% less.
But in 10 years, swelling an organisation by 150,000 employees, that's big. Surely, just on that alone, that is an eye-watering number that you think, really, are all of those jobs necessary? Or are they doing jobs that are necessary, which means that older jobs should have been binned off?
Absolutely. I think no civil servant would say and look around and see how the civil service has grown and say that is something that they think has worked well. But you've got to look at the reasons why that's happened. Civil servants don't get to decide the size of the civil service. Ministers do. The chaos, the political chaos. For the last 10 years, they've talked a lot about cutting numbers. The last government talked about 90,000 jobs, yet at the same time continue to make promise after promise after promise and increase the number of civil servants. It wasn't civil servants themselves who did that. It was ministers, because it was chaotic. How the administration and the government has run for the last 10 years has been chaotic.
Oh, I cannot argue with that one, Dave. I really can't.
Inefficient. It's wholly inefficient. If you change policy direction every time you change a minister, that is wholly inefficient. People working on one policy then switch to work on another. So what we need is stability. We need a plan that matches commitments to resources. And that way you will get slimmed down and more efficient and effective civil service.
Now, what about finally, before I let you go, the argument that civil servants should be back in work at least 2 days a week? Apparently, there are various civil servants that are threatening to strike over the fact that they're being asked to get out from under their blankets and go back to the office. Why shouldn't they, like most of the hardworking people in this nation, set an alarm clock, put on proper clothes, go to their place of work, sit and do a full day's work? I'm not saying that everyone working from home is skiving, but this is running the country. This isn't just sort of, I don't know, filling out a data spreadsheet. These are people who wield a lot of power, a lot of responsibility, and it'd be great to see people actually coming into central London, sitting where they should be at their desks, where they can be supervised.
So civil service has a rule which is 60%, so that they expect a minimum of 60%, so 3 days a week if you're working full time. But you talk about efficiency and saving taxpayers' money. The government announced a couple of weeks ago that it's once again cutting the number of big offices in central London that are very expensive. Just the latest round of that is going to save £100 million a year to the taxpayer. If you can do your job as well, working hybridly, sometime in the office, sometime at home, that's good for you as an individual because you get greater flexibility, and it's good for the taxpayer because it's more efficient. And that finding that balance is what government is trying to do. Currently, the rule is 60%, so civil servants are expected to come in at least 3 days a week. That's about the average.
But what's wrong with going in 5 days a week?
Well, if you look at even the private sector recognise that. You can go in 5 days a week if you want, but you're going to have to provide offices for people to do that. And you're going to have to accept that that's going to cost more than it does just now. And that's what efficiency is about. It's not rhetoric. It's saying, what's the reality here? If actually you can get the same from people, but it costs less.
But if people are going in 2-3 days a week, they still need a desk to sit at. They can't just sort of stand outside and magically have hovering laptops in the air. So those desks in that office space has to be there, whether it's being used 5 days a week or 3 days a week, surely.
But they do that in hot desks. So if you look at some of the big hubs that the civil service have got now around some of the main train stations, they've got about a desk ratio of about 50-60%. So it's actually much smaller offices for the numbers of people, and that saves the taxpayer money. Getting that right, rather than just having some dogma around it, is the way that will work for civil servants and work for the public. If you're saving £100 million a year, just by the recent announcement of closure of about 3 offices in central London, that dwarfs the sort of money that you've been talking about DE&I. So that's a good thing for the taxpayer. It's a good thing for civil servants as well, because they get flexibility and we can attract good talent into the civil service as a result of that, and it's a good thing for taxpayers.
Dave Penman, General Secretary of the FDA Union, thank you ever so much. I'm just so over that. Do you know, the UK has got the worst record now of being the country where working from home is just sort of par for the course now. Most of the countries since the pandemic have dragged themselves back out of the front door and started going into workplaces. And it's not just about, look, flexible working is one thing. I think it definitely helps mothers, for instance, be able to contribute to the workplace. But at the same time, I just don't. It's a bit like why school children should wear school uniform. I don't buy into anymore this idea that, oh, it's appropriate for people to keep working from home and you get lots done. Everybody who works from home, like everyone I know who works from home, knows that it gives them a bit of a free ride to do how they want to do things, which usually means cutting corners, not always being at the desk, you know, putting a load of washing on. It does make life nicer. I'm not saying it doesn't. But it's to me, it instills this sort of lackadaisicalness about the job if you're sitting there doing it from home. It doesn't instill the discipline, the responsibility, the industriousness, that sort of idea that you're doing a role, you're out there performing a duty. And I just don't think it's particularly healthy, personally. OK, right, we're going to take a short advert break now. But we're learning, actually, that police let half of people who take Class A drugs just walk free. And that possession of the strongest drugs are basically being treated as medical issues rather than criminal issues by UK police forces. We're discussing that after this.
One of the things that a lot of people don't realise about cannabis, that excessive use can produce psychosis.
Yeah.
So we do get quite a lot of incidents within London of psychopathic behaviour of people who are extreme cannabis users. So there is some truth in the fact that it's a damaging drug.
Yeah, I think that's a massive issue that's often overlooked. People think of it as just some sort of, we just a few people sort of sitting around smoking dope. It's not. That's certainly not the kind of drugs a lot of people are using.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there, welcome back. And now, did you know that basically half of all people who are caught in possession of Class A drugs are basically just allowed to walk free? Basically decriminalising it, isn't it, if that's the case? And most police officers now regard the abuse of drugs to be a medical issue rather than a criminal matter. Let's speak to David Shipley, who is a former prisoner and a writer and researcher on prison and justice issues. David, thanks for coming back on the show. Only a third of Class A drug possession offences resulted in a charge. Now, do you think that actually this is a sensible way forward? Because actually drugs rehabilitation should potentially be at the heart of people who have got an addiction or a user problem. And a lot of people, if they're addicted to drugs, might have mental health issues. They wind up in prison and probably end up smoking more drugs.
I think those descriptions are true, but this is the worst possible way to approach it. So you're absolutely right. Lots of people have big mental health problems, serious mental health issues. Lots of people have addiction issues, and many of them end up going to prison, where they often get worse, and that's terrible. And we should try to treat those people, not jail them. But if we were trying to solve that seriously, we'd be creating proper treatment environments, we'd be diverting mentally ill people from prison to secure mental health environments. We're not doing any of that. There's not been a debate in Parliament or a policy. The police are just deciding to withdraw from policing crime. And in this case, it's the possession of Class A drugs. And all that will happen then is those people are going to carry on taking drugs, developing addiction issues if they're going to, developing mental health problems with no support or help. And it's just storing up more harm for them and for society in the future.
But also it's giving a free pass, isn't it, to international criminal cartels, to drugs overlords, to terrorist organisations, all those people who exploit the drugs trade to fill their coffers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the problem with decriminalisation. You know, if you were an ardent libertarian, you said, right, we're going to legalise all drugs, they're going to be produced and sold by companies that pay taxes, then there's an argument for that. Decriminalising like this, where we just stop policing possession at a small scale, leaves all the production, all the money in the hands of organised crime. And they do a huge amount of harm. You know, they pay to have people shipped into this country illegally. There's a radio series out this week on BBC Sounds talking about this called The Smuggler, about a Vietnamese cannabis growing network that was shipping loads of people across the channel in small boats. You know, so it funds that illegal industry as well. And so this kind of decriminalisation, I think, is very dangerous because it just makes life a little bit easier for organised crime. So what's your response, actually, to what Sadiq Khan has said in recent days, saying that he thinks cannabis should be decriminalised? We know that 3/4 or 72% of people caught in possession of cannabis are just let go without any criminal sanctions. Anyone walking down London, and frankly the streets of most towns and cities in the UK, are probably familiar with the miasmic waft of Sensi hanging over every single street corner. But Sadiq Khan's turned around and basically said that cannabis should be decriminalised because there's a disproportionate effect on the prosecution or the stopping and searching of young black men. To me, I read this as a particular minority breaks the law. Oh, well, we'll have to get rid of that law then. There is a real issue in that black men do get stopped more on suspicion of having cannabis, but actually have cannabis at the same rate as everyone the police stops. So there's definitely some racial disparity going on there. But I think the actual bigger issue, and I wrote about this in The Spectator this week, is that cannabis consumption seems to particularly harm Afro-Caribbeans. So there's been a study done looking at the impact of this in London, and actually Afro-Caribbean men are substantially more likely to develop cannabis psychosis if they smoke a lot of strong weed. And actually making it easier for people to access really harmful substances isn't being kind. I think, to the extent that there might be racism in who's stopped, that can be solved without making it easier for the drugs trade and harming more people. Is a lot of this stuff also a bit like the sort of broken windows argument, that if you let go what some might consider small-scale criminality, possession of an illegal drug, that actually it's sort of, it's the thin end of a wedge. It opens up further criminal activity down the line? I think it is. And I think also a lot of this is not really happening because the British state has decided to shift policy on drugs. I think a lot of it is just it hasn't got the capacity or the will to do its job anymore. This is Robert Jenrick posted a great video about this yesterday, talking about all these many ways in which society is getting worse and less orderly and less law-abiding. And it's not because we've made a choice as a country. It's just because we've given up, it feels like. The police are just not bothering to police whole sets of crime now. And we're seeing, a horrible decline in our nation as a result. And in terms of prison and the access to drugs in prison, because, one might argue that if you've got a particular drugs habit and you get on the wrong side of the law and you end up in prison, it could actually serve as a brilliant wake-up call, that it's an opportunity to reevaluate your life and see where you've gone wrong and think, blimey, it's got so bad that I'm now in clink. I really should make a change and have a clean start. And ideally, prison should be a place where you're forced to go cold turkey. But it's not really like that, is it? It's not, and I think that's the really sad thing. Some people do get shaken up by prison and get away from their addictions, but actually what we do is we put a lot of people with drug addictions in prisons with a lot of people who deal drugs. And there is a continual supply of drugs into our prisons. Organised crime often corrupts staff or uses drones or other methods to get drugs inside prisons. There's a huge market in there. And actually, on average, people will go in and come out more addicted to more drugs. So really what we should do is we should have different prisons. You know, for people who are addicted and have mental health issues, they need to be in a secure environment focused around treating them. You know, like the old secure hospitals we used to have. And I think, you know, someone who's dealing or violent, whatever, they could go to a normal prison, which should separate those two populations.
David Shipley, former prisoner himself, writer and research on prison and justice issues. Thank you ever so much. You know, I think social media should be held more to account because a lot of illicit drugs are just openly peddled on platforms like Instagram and Snapchat and WhatsApp. And I never hear anyone say to social media companies, you are directly enabling abject criminality. And if your platform allows that, we will come after you. Now, there's a thought. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because after the break, I'm going to be speaking to Paul Embry, writer and trade unionist, as well as a pro-Brexit campaigner, author of Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. We're going to be chewing over all the news stories just after this. See you on the other side.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of £70.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. And what a great first hour we have had. Thank you for your messages that are coming in thick and fast. Let's do some of them now, shall we? Because otherwise I'll forget. When Starmer started going on about Nigel Farage, running him and his policies down, my wife and I looked at each other and laughed, as it was almost like he was quoting his own CV. Why is it that every time I look at him, he reminds me of Father Dougal from Father Ted? Have a lovely day, says Brett from Margate. Father Dougal, Starmer reminds you of Father Dougal. He's a bit dumb, but he was sweet. Bless little Father Dougal. Problem with Starmer is he's not dumb and he's not sweet. He's actually, I think, quite a bright man, despite having the charisma of a piece of blue tack and probably as much ideological integrity as one as well. But the thing is, he is a very bright man. He's just legally bright. You know, he's a manager, he's a law keeper, he's international law. He doesn't have any political conviction. He likes the idea of high office. He wants to be powerful. He knows a lot about how the international law works. In fact, he's probably got a little altar at home with, like, you know, a sort of mock-up of the ECHR buildings in Strasbourg that he bows down to and worships every night. But the problem is he isn't stupid at all. That's what worries me. And the other problem is we've got lazy legacy media who don't ever look into some of the weird stuff, like the fact that there's Lord Hermer, our current Attorney General, who has no political experience at all, the first Attorney General to have had whiffle to do with politics in over a century. It was basically Starmer's Bezza and his donor, now lording it over our legal system with some fairly controversial and fast becoming swiftly outmoded leftist ideologies, constantly taking UK taxpayers' money to challenge the UK government over stuff. Got a bit of a hinterland in that direction. Do you not think that's weird? Should we not be asking some questions about that? I think we ought. Joanna in Salisbury says, I have total faith in reform to run this country like a well-oiled engine once he's got the gunk out of the engine. My fear is Starmer, the harmer lawyer who will tie everything up in knots legally. Yes, I've always thought Starmer has been using being PM as a stepping stone for a bigger job, probably in the EU. He's already proved how good he is at lying. His job qualification has just been proved. Starmer will end up, I'm sure, when he leaves UK politics. I think when he's no longer Prime Minister, he's going to bin it off, isn't he? I can't imagine him being a backbencher. I think he was in it to probably get to the top. He's there. I don't think he's enjoying it, if rumours are to be believed. And I think when his time is over, as opposed to being put out for pasture in the House of Lords, so they'd probably quite enjoy that. I reckon he could find himself sort of UN, ECHR. He said himself, didn't he? He's happier at Davos. Right, let's speak to Paul Embry now, who's a writer and trade unionist, pro-Brexit campaigner as well. One of those lovely unicorns, a traditional leftist who loved the idea of UK sovereignty. He's also the author of Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Good question, why does it? Here he is now. Good morning to you, Paul. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Let's first of all talk about Farage tacking to the left. Some say it's sort of in response to scupper the Labour Party, pull the rug from under Starmer's feet. Nigel had a whiff of blood. He saw that the Labour Party were in turmoil over whether or not to scrap the two-child benefits cap and sort of beat him to the punch and said, we would do that, although he did highlight it would be for native Brits, not migrants who come in to benefit from our welfare system, and says it's all about pronatalism. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch says absolutely not. Hard-working people paying taxes should not be supporting other people to have children. Who do you think is right on this?
I have to say, I think Nigel Farage is right, and there are many things, certainly economically, that I don't agree with Nigel Farage on, and I suspect that instinctively this is not something that he would wish to do particularly, but it is clearly a political calculation. I mean, first of all, I think on the morality of the cap, I think it's wrong. I think it should be lifted. The truth is that we're not having enough kids in this country. And if we can incentivize people to have more, then frankly every little helps. But I think what Nigel Farage has done is to realise what Kemi Badenoch has not realised, which is that people in the red wall and in working class communities who may be peeling away from the Labour Party, and many of them are in significant number, by the same token are not particularly attracted by, if you like, a rehashed Thatcherism, and not particularly enthused by what you might call a Singapore-on-Thames model for the British economy, which is get the state out of everyone's lives, roll back the frontiers of the state, hand over everything to the market, privatise everything, low tax, low regulation, and so on. There are some people, undoubtedly, certainly old-style Conservatives, who that agenda would appeal to, but I don't think people particularly in the red wall. And I think Farage has realised that, and I think that he realises, or is beginning to realise, that if he's going to lock in the support from the red wall, then what he needs to do is to marry, if you like, the traditional social and cultural, the small c conservative agenda on social and cultural issues with a fairer, more interventionist policy economically. If he can marry those two things, that's the sweet spot in British politics, then I think Labour could be in big, big trouble.
Now, Labour obviously, I think, know that they're in big, big trouble because they had this rather strange decision to hold a press conference seemingly all about Nigel Farage, which to me, as someone who has been a political consultant and advised world leaders on how to run election campaigns, I think is totally anathema when it comes to knowing the best tactics to scupper your opponent. What you don't do is stand behind a lectern and talk about them for half an hour. And looking at the questions, it didn't really work out according to plan. Let's have a look at a montage of the sort of skewering that Starmer got from the press pack yesterday.
Do you think one of the problems is that Nigel Farage can approximate talking like a human being, where you just resort to talking points and dodging questions.
The speed of the decline in your popularity is historically unprecedented. Isn't this speech today an admission that you have failed and Nigel Farage understands voters better than you?
Nigel Farage has 5 MPs, you've got 403. Are you panicking because Reform is so far ahead in the polls, it seems? Is he living rent-free in your brain? You went to a state school, your dad worked in a factory, your mum worked in the NHS, so why has a public school-educated former city trader got more in common with the Red Wall than you have?
Reform UK say you're running scared of them, that you're sounding increasingly like them with some of the policies and announcements you've made recently. This is a speech that was very defensive, wasn't it? Are you not worried people will ask why you're holding a press conference about Nigel Farage 4 years out from a general election instead of focusing on your plans for the country?
You went into the election promising to freeze national insurance and keep the two-child benefit cap. You've since raised national insurance on businesses and now you're considering axing the cap. Isn't attacking Nigel Farage's economic credibility a bit rich?
I mean, it didn't exactly work out that well for him, did it, Paul?
I agree with you. I think tactically, I think that was a silly move. Essentially, he's given a huge amount of oxygen and publicity to a party which is clearly a threat, and I'm pretty sure the Labour Party knows that privately. But actually standing in front of the national media and admitting that it's a threat, arguably the biggest threat, was probably not the wisest thing to do, certainly this far out from the election when things could potentially change. But that said, I think Reform probably are here to stay. I think that this is not a flash in the pan. This is not a kind of SDP situation in the early 1980s where they emerged in a blaze of glory and their star fizzled out just a few years later. I think we probably are seeing a genuine realignment in British politics. I think some of the old tribal loyalties really are breaking down. And when you look at, Reform, they came. I mean, they've only got, what is it, five, 6 MPs, whatever it is at the moment, 5 MPs at the moment, but they came second in 98 seats in the general election last year, 89 of which were won by Labour and 60 of which were in the north of England. So, as I said, they have clearly parked their tanks on Labour's lawn, and privately, Labour, I think, is wise to recognise the threat, but publicly, I think this was a stupid thing to do. But the truth is that all of the talk in the world, all of the talk from Starmer standing in front of the media saying how Reform are not the answer, that I don't think is going to shift anything in terms of the opinion polls. The only thing that Labour can do to negate the Reform threat is to deliver on its manifesto promises. Right. And it's not really doing that at the moment. Growth in the economy, getting immigration numbers down, getting waiting lists down, until there's significant progress on those 3 things, then all the scaremongering about Reform in the world isn't going to make a difference.
Well, exactly. And what's interesting is we know that this is also part of a populist revolution that has been sweeping the West. The anti-globalist revolution, where ordinary people are going, OK, we've had enough of being dictated to by supranational entities who tell us that challenging mass migration makes us racist, that has seen us sign up to international net zero treaties that it's impoverishing us, that has seen us sort of being forced to reject the glue, the societal glue that holds us together, rooted in cultural Judeo-Christian values. And we've had enough. And what we have seen in other instances in other countries is where the legacy parties have not been able to deal with or tackle the sort of issues you're talking about. Populist parties have won, and won bigly, to quote Donald Trump. And there's an interesting article by Alistair Heath in The Telegraph yesterday, which was talking about this and saying, OK, so look at all the things that they have thrown at various populist leaders around the world. The lawfare, the accusations of fraud, accusing them of being far-right or extremist and therefore dangerous, corralling big organisations such as the UN or the ECHR or the ECB or whoever it may be to all come out and scream, oh, it's going to be terrible, the sky is going to fall down, like they all did during Brexit, and asking, they are going to want to do this to Nigel. They're not going to be able to beat him in politics proper because they're not going to be able to deliver on the sort of concerns that voters have. And so they are going to have to decry everything he does as utterly horrific, terrifying and doom-laden, which is why I think Nigel Farage has come out early accusing Sir Keir Starmer of Project Fear 2.0. Do you think that the voters are going to sort of be rather Teflon to some of these negative attacks on Farage? Farage. Do you think it is a case of sort of Michael Gove during the Brexit campaign saying we've had enough of experts? Because in many respects, Brexit wasn't the apocalypse that everyone said it was going to be. This stuff sort of doesn't really work anymore, does it?
No, and I think Brexit was the biggest example of that, that actually people who feel that the economy isn't particularly working for them and that the status quo isn't working for them don't really have much to lose. So when you know, the powers that be, big business, the major political parties, you know, if you like, the liberal kind of technocratic elite come along and say to them, you really shouldn't vote for this guy or this party or this thing in that referendum because it's going to disrupt the country, then I think many of them were probably more inclined to say, well, that's exactly what I want to do because, you know what, it's not working for me the way that you guys are running it at the moment. I think on your point, I think there will clearly be a lot of resistance to Farage. We've seen, you know, the guy in Romania whose election was annulled a couple of months ago. We've seen the thing going on with Le Pen in France. Not necessarily people that I would have voted for, but if we truly believe in democracy, as we claim to do, we've got to accept that sometimes it throws up people who we don't necessarily ourselves support. And we saw with the attempt to overturn Brexit, you know, what people in this country, what the you know, the state, if you like, and what the establishment is capable of. But I think on the broader point about the populist movements across Europe, it's pretty clear that globalization isn't working for millions of people. They were told it was going to enrich them financially and culturally and in all sorts of ways, but actually what it's led to across much of the West, particularly in working class communities, is massive deindustrialization, rapid demographic change. It's violated people's sense of community and belonging. It's upturned social cohesion, I think, in a significant way. And until the leaders of that, if you like, that liberal technocratic class grasp that and actually work with populist movements and people who are inclined to support populist movements to try to remedy some of those problems, then I think those movements are just going to get stronger.
Well, they've painted themselves into a corner, haven't they? They've vilified Nigel Farage for years for being some sort of demonic xenophobe, and the public have gone, well, we think he had a point all along, so I just don't think it's going to work. Now, talking about the sort of liberal leftist elites that you were describing there, I can't think of anybody who fits that bill better right now than Lord Hermer, who is our Attorney General, the first Attorney General to have never been in politics before in 100 years. He's turned around and compared the Tories and Reform UK to the Nazi Party for questioning the jurisdiction of the ECHR, who, as we all know, have presided over some very questionable and controversial decisions. This idea, actually, that if we left the European Courts of Human Rights, we'd start sticking kids up chimneys and reintroducing Chop Chop Square outside the Tower of London. And this guy, when you look at his back catalogue of work, he's the one who, you know, pushed for the Chagos Islands to be given to Mauritius. He's the one who's been advising Caribbean governments on how to call for slavery reparations. He's defended Gerry Adams. He called Just Stop Oil inspiring. He said that all education secretaries in this country should learn about the evils of British colonialism. He hates British exceptionalism, unless, of course, it seems that Britain is exceptionally evil or bad or malign. He's defended Al-Qaeda terrorists. He wants Shamima Begum to come home. He oversaw the prosecution of rioters and helped put people in prison for social media posts. And he has the audacity to turn around and say that people questioning the jurisdiction of the ECHR, as 9 EU countries are doing right now, who are very angry at the same loss of sovereignty and decision-making, which they see as an act of national self-harm, he has the audacity to turn around and call us the dangerous ones.
Well, I just think I don't know a huge amount about this guy, and some of the things you listed, one or two of them, I would perhaps agree with him on. But on the point about the claim that this represents Nazism and fascism and a return to the 30s and so on, I just find that sort of stuff so tedious. It seems to be now the go-to accusation from members of the liberal establishment. Whenever somebody proposes something that doesn't fit with their own worldview, then they claim that it's, you know, consistent with Nazi thought and fascist ideology and that kind of thing. And it just debases, frankly, the whole the whole reality of what Nazism and fascism were. And I think the danger of it as well is, you know, there are probably a small minority of people in this country still who do have sympathy with that kind of ideology, with Nazism and fascism. But what it allows them to do, when essentially you use the word so liberally and you dismiss, you know, the significant chunk of the population as believing in that ideology, it allows the real Nazis and fascists to kind of slink into the mainstream, if you like. So they can say, well, I'm not really a Nazi and fascist because, look, they call Mrs. Jones, who lives at 23 Acacia Avenue, a Nazi and a fascist. So they say it about everybody. So it's a real dangerous thing to do as well. There is a legitimate case, not necessarily one that I agree with, but there is a legitimate case for leaving the ECHR. And the idea that people who articulate that case, because, for example, they want to reassert control over borders, are Nazis and fascists, that I think just devalues the entire argument and is a poor reflection on those who peddle that.
Yeah, do you know, if I was in charge, I'd start forbidding the term of Nazi and fascist unless someone was an actual Nazi and fascist, because, like you, I agree, it dumbs down not only the most horrific atrocities in history, which I think is offensive to all those people who lost their lives fighting the twin spectres of evil that stalked across Europe at the start of the last century, but it also renders any accusation in the modern age just absolutely worthless. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because if the left keep pointing at the right wing as being Nazis and fascists, it sort of suggests that they're so dangerous they need to be stopped by any means. And I think actually provokes violence against political opponents. Paul Embry, thank you ever so much. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but I don't know if you've seen it circulating on social media. Good old Jenrick, he's had his Ozempic, he cut his hair short, he became tough on immigration. Well, not just that, he's now evolved into an actual vigilante. That's right, he's been stalking fare dodgers and challenging them to their face. We're going to be watching that clip after the break and speaking to Susan Hall, who's the leader of the Conservative group in the London Assembly, after this.
Sometimes you've got to get out of a suit, get out Westminster, frankly, and shame the authorities into doing things. And I was just fed up seeing people dodging their fares, not just on the London Underground, but all over the country. I represent a community up in Nottinghamshire, and I've seen it there as well. And I felt that something had to be done. And so I've done this video. There's been a massive reaction to it. And now, at least in London, I want Sadiq Khan, our do-nothing mayor, to step up, pull his finger out and get to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. Now, if you missed it over the last couple of days, this brilliant video that's gone viral on social media of Jenrick, who is now a vigilante, tackling fare dodgers on the London Underground. It's quite a thing. Have a watch.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want, but everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, do you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it. Or at least most of it. Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents.
Hello, hello.
You're on camera, mate. You're banged to rights.
Just step to the side and...
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
It's like Rupert the Bear getting tough on crims, isn't it? I love it. I love it. Let's speak now to Susan Hall AM, leader of the Conservative group in the London Assembly. Now, look, I take delight in watching that. I mean, look, good for Jenrick. He is highlighting a problem that all too often we're not allowed to talk about, are we? Because if you live in London, you see it all the time. People just pushing through the ticket barriers. Nothing is done. Once upon a time, if you nicked a loaf of bread or similar, you were hauled off to Australia to create Asbo Islands. Now, if you're a fare dodger or a petty thief, it's just, oh, well, let them get on with it because, Lord knows, you might stab someone up for challenging you. But this is a real problem, isn't it? Because Transport for London staff have been told they don't need to intervene to stop fare dodgers. Of course, TfL overseen by Sir Sadiq Khan. If they're worried that it wouldn't be safe to do so, well, that's pretty much everybody, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And it's getting worse and worse. I don't know if you use the Underground, Alex, but yeah. I'm on it. Yeah, well, then you'll see it every day like I do. And it's so annoying. Good on Robert Jenrick, I say, for highlighting something we all know is going on. I brought it up with the mayor several times, and it's just poo-hooed. I think one of the reasons they tell their staff not to intervene is that one of the gentlemen on the clip actually says he's carrying a knife. The only thing I would say, though, is if there are 8 enforcement officers nearby, I do think then when there's more than one of them, they should actually start going up to those gates and saying, what are you doing?
I couldn't agree more. It's so infuriating. And at the same time, you see people getting onto the London Underground, hoods pulled up, masks on, and you think, well, they've got ill intent. They're not that worried about COVID or not getting their hair wet. They're all out thugs. What is the solution, though? Because, you know, you do see a lot of high-vis Jobsworths just standing there, and some sort of, grotty kid will push through the gates. And they do it deliberately, provocatively, pigeon-chested, you can't do anything to stop me. There tends to be a sort of shared characteristic among loads of these people. But what is the answer? Because the problem is, in this day and age, frankly speaking, they could be carrying a knife, and they could, even if they don't respond criminally by actually threatening someone with that blade, the likelihood is a subset of these people will turn around and accuse whoever tried to stop them of being a racist. Then you end up with people being suspended while they're being investigated and tribunals. And so, it's just kind of easy to go, oh, well, easier to let it ride.
Yeah, I would actually put AI cameras up at every single exit point because it's the same people that do it. You and I, Alex, would not dream of doing it, along with a hell of a lot of the population. But these kids and older people that do it all the time, they are costing a fortune. And the figures we got was about 130 million. I think it's far, far more than that. That's just a guesstimate from TfL. I think cameras should go up so they can catch the repeat offenders, and that way, they can track these people down. These days with AI, they can find out a lot of criminals doing it. And let's face it, if you're prepared to not pay for your fare, you're likely to be the type that would do something else that's equally illegal.
But Sadiq Khan's got no intention of tackling this, does he? Because the problem with Sadiq Khan is it always comes down to the bottom line of it. I can just predict the end result will be, well, certain people are targeted or fall victim to being prosecuted for this disproportionately.
Yeah, I know, and we've heard it time and time again. Believe me, I hear it more than you do, Alex.
I bet you
because
do.
I'm up against him the whole time in City Hall. It's so frustrating because if those of us that pay our fares on this particular instance then constantly watch other people not doing it, it just builds up massive resentment. And that's half the problem with everything now. When we see things going on that we think is unfair, that's when British people get very, very fed up.
Oh, we do get fed up, and we know that there's a two-tier system, and especially when it comes to the transport network. It seems to me that, you know, certain people pay and other people get to ride for free, and nothing's ever done about it. It must be pretty hard trying to bring this up time and time again with Sir Sadiq. On that, let's stick with the topic of your, I was going to call him an arch nemesis. Maybe you're his arch nemesis, but the London mayor, with him saying, well, look, we need to scrap we need to legalise cannabis. We need to scrap the laws that says that, you know, people can be prosecuted for carrying cannabis. Because guess what? Ethnic minority communities are prosecuted or face inspections or stop and searches a lot more than white people. I mean, to me, it just seems once again that Sadiq Khan is saying, oh, well, because certain people break the law, let's just get rid of the law.
Well, the thing with Sadiq Khan, he has never approved of stop and search. He's never liked it. And the truth is, stop and search is a very, very important tool for the police to be able to stop people and see what they're carrying, whether it's knives or cannabis. The latest report that came out, I think it was yesterday, it says that they're recommending that it's illegal to sell it, but not illegal to carry an amount that you use for yourself. Well, if these police officers now got to think, right, is that an amount that could be sold, or is that person carrying it for themselves? It just puts yet more onus on the police to make decisions that they're then going to be criticised of. I mean, it's just ludicrous, as if we haven't got enough problems with our police service at the moment, or police force, I should say.
Susan, I couldn't agree more. Susan Hall, their leader of the Conservatives in the London Assembly. It drives me mad. In London, you may as well just not have law. You may as well just have lawlessness, because whether it's nicking phones on the street, whether it's pushing through ticket barriers, whether it's possession and sale of illegal drugs, you know, it's just all basically allowed now. And stabbing. That's become a blimmin' national sport, hasn't it? And I think what we just need are police to do proper policing. We need more and more police on the streets, Victorian-style system, blowing the whistle, intervening, tackling people on bikes, putting them in prisons, putting them in borstalls. You know, set up these big Nightingale prisons, chuck them all in there, throw away the key. I'm fed up of it, because the more you allow what is considered low-level crime, and it isn't low-level, I'm afraid, you know, selling drugs, evading fares and theft is not low-level. No, but instead they go after the real low-level crime, which is actually non-crime, don't they? By chucking people in prison for words on social media. I mean, it's the downfall of Western civilization, this sort of brain rot. OK, talking about the downfall of Western civilization, one thinks that when a country starts handing out its sovereign territory to the mates of its worst enemy, that might also indicate things aren't looking particularly good. We're going to be discussing that, the fact that China has, of course they have, rubbed their hands together in glee at Sir Keir Starmer's Chagos deal. We're going to be discussing that with Lord Robathan, former Conservative Armed Forces Minister, after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello. In example number 3,624 of very unsurprising news stories, China has described Sir Keir Starmer's decision to surrender sovereignty of the Chagos Islands as a massive achievement for Mauritius, despite a claim by the UK government that the deal was actually opposed by Beijing. In fact, China fully supports the country's attempt to safeguard national sovereignty when talking about Mauritius. What national sovereignty? When did Mauritius ever own the Chagos Islands? Of course, China loves it because China is a close military ally of Mauritius. They've been doing combined exercises together lately, and now it means China gets to sniff all over a strategic military base for both the US and the UK. Let's speak now to Lord Rabothan, former Conservative Armed Forces Minister. The more I learn about this Chagos deal, the smellier it becomes. The fact that you had a Chinese judge sitting in the international courts of justice who pushed for this stuff. The fact that Mauritius has got nothing to do, quite frankly, with the Chagos Islands. The fact that we're now paying for this loss of sovereignty and there was no actual legal need to do this. And the fact that when you look at the initial advice given to the UK, it was infested with woke chat about colonialism, etc. I mean, what on earth is going on here? It was clear that China saw this as a big win. They've been trying to build artificial atolls in the sea to control more and more of the oceans and build military bases so they can stalk maritime routes and disrupt international flows of trade, energy and food. And yet we were told that China opposed this deal.
Well, I think we need to look back at who's supported this deal, which is the cabal of human rights lawyers who now run this country. Starmer, his former colleague in human rights, Hermer, and others as well. I mean, this is absolute nonsense. People that disregard our history, that feel guilty with the fact that we were a colonial power. I don't feel guilty of having had an empire at all. Not everything was right, but not everything was wrong either. And they are trying to give away the islands of the Chagos Islands, not to the Chagosian Islanders, but to Mauritius, which has never controlled the Chagos Islands. It's absolutely extraordinary, and it relates to the fact that we have a Attorney General, Lord Hermer, who only yesterday suggested that those that oppose the European Court of Human Rights are akin to the Nazis. Now, come on, this is complete, I'll use my words carefully, this is complete rubbish. And it's really very distressing to see it. And the people that are running this country now have no interest in the history of this country. They want to put right perceived faults that this country may have had in the past or may not have had, but the only people that have any right to claim the Chagos Islands, apart from the United Kingdom, were actually the Chagos Islanders who opposed this deal.
And let's talk now about why this is so militarily sensitive. Let's talk about Diego Garcia, the big air base there. The fact that actually in this deal, there's some sort of agreement to tell Mauritius every time there's going to be some sort of military exercise. Oh, hi there, please don't tell Beijing, but we might be flying some jets off that island to intervene in something happening internationally. Or we might be sending a boat out to make sure that these Chinese spy vessels aren't stalking the oceans where they shouldn't be. I mean, it just seems to me so dangerous because anybody who's a watcher of geopolitics understands that China is obsessed with controlling the seas. It's all about those maritime routes because they are the arteries, basically, of international trade and commerce and security. How on earth could this ever have seemed like a good idea?
You'll have to ask Keir Starmer that, or Lord Hermer. Both of them are, in my opinion, completely misguided. They are following a sort of woke interpretation of human rights law. And human rights are very important, but not the way the law is being interpreted. And this is absolutely wrong. And the court, the International Court of Justice, 15 judges. There was a Somali, there was a Chinese chap, and there was a Russian amongst those 15 judges. And believe me, these are not our friends. These people are our enemies. And I'm afraid judges in Russia, certainly, and I expect in China as well, lean towards whatever the government tells them to do.
Right, I mean,
and that's what they did.
We also know that there's potentially significant amounts of interference going on with that decision as well. Do you think this government has a China problem? Because I noticed that basically the minute he gets into 10 Downing Street, most of his front bench are being sent off to Beijing to, you know, touch palms with seniors in the Chinese Communist Party. Rachel Reeves has gone over, David Lammy's gone over, Starmer can't wait to go over himself. And you think, hang about, did you not get the memo from the intelligence services that China could potentially wish us a lot of harm? The sort of friends that China keeps, the fact that China is hand in glove with Russia, who we're currently trying to stop stalking across in an aggressive manner Europe. I mean, what is it with the Labour Party in China? There's something funny going on.
Alex, you put it better than I can, really. Look, the problem is they don't have any faith in this country. They bemoan the fact this country has an imperial past. They feel we have to bend over backwards for to be taking part in international agreements. Now, look at who makes the international agreements. It's one thing setting up the United Nations after the Second World War, indeed the League of Nations after the First World War, neither of which actually worked particularly well. But what we've got now is we've got stupid, and I say the word stupid advisedly, human rights lawyers making decisions based on their perception of what the law should be, not on what is the actuality of things, which is that the International Court of Justice, as you so rightly say, a lot of people are being bought, countries are being bought. If you go to sub-Saharan Africa, you'll find China is buying half of sub-Saharan Africa with loans and projects which people will never be able to pay. And we need to understand this is what China wants to do. We shouldn't treat China as an enemy, but they are not necessarily our friend.
Well, I think the intelligence services for a long time have been warning the UK government about the peril of allowing China too much slack and enabling them to interpenetrate our infrastructure. As someone who used to live in Ghana, I can tell you that a good 20 years ago when I was living there, China was all over Ghana trying to access everything, their copper deposits, their fishing, their mines, all of their resources with their Belt and Road Initiative, and actually help impoverish Africa in the process. But is it just a case of that people like Sir Keir Starmer and his cabal are just woefully naive, that they have been captured so much by this sort of trendy leftist ideology that Britain bad and actually we've got to sort of self-flagellate at the altar of political correctness and start self-harming in order to sort of, you know, rectify our sins of the past? Is it just naivety and ideological capture? Or is there something else going on here? Because surely if you're there in number 10, receiving those briefings from the intelligence services, you know, being told by our American friends, by our Five Eyes colleagues that don't mess with China, it ain't a good idea, and then you go and do the exact opposite. Is that just naivety or is it something else?
Well, I always like to be an optimist, and I will say they're just damn stupid, not that they're behaving in an illegal manner. But I have to say, it's a very good question you ask, and why on earth would you do it? Why are you doing these things? Why are you giving things away at great cost to us? Why are you doing this? What is the benefit to Britain and what is the benefit to international relations? That's what they should be asking. And frankly, there's no benefit to Britain nor to international relations, quite the opposite.
No, indeed. I want to talk about Lord Hermer because you sort of, you know, alluded earlier to his particular ideology in his hinterland. He was, of course, Starmer's chum when they were in the Doughty chambers together. He was a donor to Starmer. He directly contributed, so I understand, to Sir Keir Starmer's campaign. He's never been in politics before, and then he magically becomes the first Attorney General in 100 years to have not been elected or served in Parliament or the Lords, to have the highest legal position in the land. And in previous manifestations of his legal career, he seems to constantly be on the other side of the fence to the government. He's the one representing Gerry Adams, Al-Qaeda. Why is he in position? This, to me, at the very least, seems dodgy in a conflict of interest.
Well, I agree with you entirely. He is there because he was in the same chambers as Starmer back in 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And he has an entirely different view, in my opinion, to that of most of the British people. And you're quite right about not being elected. I mean, I'm in an unelected position in the House of Lords, but I spent 23 years as an elected MP. So I do actually understand that you have to talk to people and speak and hear what they have to say. But he, of course, has never walked the streets and talked to people and heard what they have to say. He's just talked to his left-wing chums about how to destroy a lot of the things in this country which most people hold dear.
If I was going to pick the person to basically legally represent the government as the Attorney General, the last person on my wish list would be the man who's made gazillions of pounds by doing the exact opposite.
Well, and indeed, and look, he's... You'll get me going in a minute.
Go on, get going. Let's do it.
Particularly, I mean, the issue of Jerry Adams, where he's been arguing on Jerry Adams' case, which might lead to Jerry Adams, wait for it, being paid by taxpayers for blowing up British soldiers, such as friends of mine who were murdered in Northern Ireland. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. And that is what we are now in the position of. And I hope people will see through this. I think people in the so-called Red Wall up in the northeast will recognise that actually this is not what they wanted from a left-wing Labour government. They've got a hodgepodge of unpleasant people running, I think, a very dangerous government.
I think it's about time Legacy Media did a number on this man, because it's all very well going, well, he's just the Attorney General, well, he's just a lawyer, no one's really heard of him, so it doesn't make good newspaper copy. The roll call of everybody he's represented and the sorts of legal battles he has waged against UK Gov and UK PLC is eye-wateringly shocking and frightening. And the fact that he's got no political experience, the fact that he donated to Starmer, the fact that he just seems to be part of Starmer's Job for the Boys network and holds some pretty choice ideological positions, I think is of great concern. And I don't think is good enough to just sort of go, well, you know, no one's really heard of Lord Herber, let bygones be bygones. This is directly affecting the security and sovereignty of this nation.
Well, let's just get one thing straight. We have an organisation called the British Broadcasting Corporation who runs something called, is it called Verify?
Oh, yeah.
Which always finds anti-conservative. Perhaps we could get them to look at it in some detail, because they've got to do something. They're not doing anything at the moment, and there's 60 of them apparently. We need the mainstream media and indeed off-stream media to look at the details and to discuss this in detail, not in a mad way, but discuss in detail what the hell on earth are we doing with Hermer as Attorney General. I mean, I think it's really damaging to this country, and actually, I'm afraid I find this government itself is damaging this country very, very badly in so many ways. And we could discuss that for hours and hours, but we need to get rid of Hermer, and actually, the sooner we get rid of Starmer, the better as well.
I know, I mean, they're clamouring to sort of get rid of people like Suella Braverman just for using the word invasion, and this guy's literally challenged UK decisions at every single twist and turn in the past, and no one's talking about it. Oh, Lord of Bathman. Thank you ever so much, former Conservative Armed Forces Minister. There you go. Maybe if anyone's watching today from a newspaper, they might knock on the door of the editor and go, hey, do you think it's worthwhile doing a little bit of a profile piece on this Hermer character? Funny that he's the Attorney General, and yet everything he seems to have done in his career is oppose anything the UK government has ever tried to do. Make that make sense. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but if you need to get something off your chest, then look no further. You don't have to wait 2 years to go and see a therapist. You don't need to be put on any sort of magic pills, and you don't need to open the bottle of wine at this early hour. You can let it all out here. Right on Talk, the home of common sense. You can call me and release some of that pressure. Relieve yourself of the strain. Get back your sanity through a little bit of communal catharsis. 03444991000 is the number to call. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I love those and I love playing them out, so don't be coy. You know what you got to do. Let your sonorous tones echo on the airwaves. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. You have to write the word talk before you write your message. That way it knows which studio to come to. We're on X at talkTV. Going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because there's still an hour and a quarter of me left of today. And I'll see you on the other side.
Keir Starmer talking about fantasy economics. It was last June, if you recall, the Labour manifesto claimed that they would increase spending by £10 billion. 3 months later, their first budget, just 3 months later, they announced spending increases of £60 billion. And since then, they found a further £30 billion on their magic money tree for Chagos. So people listening to this programme understand that just like the Tories, there always seems to be infinite money for foreign citizens.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. And I'm pleased to say I've got a whole swathe of voice notes to play out. But before I do so, I'm going to give you the chance to win World Cup final tickets. That's right. Thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here is everything you need to know.
Hello, look who it is, it's me, Andy Goldstein. And here at TalkSport, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We're going to sort out the flights, we're going to sort out the accommodation, and we're going to give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you want. How about that?
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, all you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338. Do that by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and that's it, you're done. You're in the draw. A text will cost £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Club World Cup final prize draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, and it must arrive by 5 p.m. on the 18th of June.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, there you go. You don't want to miss out on that, do you? It sounds really cool. Thanks to our friends at DAZN. Good luck if you're entering that competition. Right, let's get on. We're getting on because I've got a whole slew of voice notes to listen and react to, and I love them. Let's hit it. This is Nick.
Good morning, Alex. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. Regarding the debate on reforms lurched to the left, I see it as entirely understandable. He's already won the support of all the Tory supporters he's going to pick up, and now he's homing in on the rest of the Labour. He doesn't see the Tories as a threat, so he's not bothered about upsetting them, and I think he's doing the right thing. Have a good weekend.
Well, there you go. That was Nick talking about reform. And it's funny, isn't it? I think we've got a bit lazy lately with this idea that there's a left and a right wing of politics, when it's far more complicated than that. And you don't have to have some sort of party that goes, right, because I believe in this, I've got to follow the entire checklist of other things I must believe in if I'm on the right or I'm on the left. You can have hybrid. You can indeed, and arguably all of Farage's entities previously have been hybrid organisations in terms of not strictly left-wing or right-wing, however many people want to label them as far-right. Now, I've got some breaking news for you. Paul Doyle, 53 years old, has been remanded in custody after appearing at Liverpool Magistrates Court, charged with 7 offences related to the Liverpool Victory Parade crash. Paul Doyle, 53 years old, now remanded in custody, having been charged at Liverpool Magistrates Court with 7 offences. Because he's now charged, we will not be talking anymore about that, apart from giving you sort of little details, because that way you jeopardise the trial. So not allowed to talk anymore about it, but there you go. He is now remanded in custody. OK, let's move on to another voice note and listen to Stuart, who's talking about the civil service.
Hi, Alex. Stuart from Wigan. I like the fact that you're arguing with this, man. I really do. The whole civil service isn't fit for purpose. They should just sack a lot of them and get some normal people in that, you know what I mean, can think for themselves, have got their own opinions and aren't scared to voice them. They're all basically a set of tools working against the English people. That's all they are. They all want sacking, same as government.
Well, you know, I just cannot believe that in under 10 years the civil service has swelled by about 150,000 new employees. No, not 100, not even 1,000, 150,000. That really is a blob, isn't it? And from people I know who have battled long and hard trying to actually run the government, they soon tend to find out that they're not really running the government at all. They're just marionettes for the civil service. You know, I was once told that very often cabinet ministers will go sit around the table with a load of printed notes of what they should ask at cabinet and just read it verbatim. So it's all smoke and mirrors. These people who supposedly are running departments and putting into place manifesto pledges are just sort of turning up, being paid a load of money to be the mouthpiece of a big sort of bloated public administration, a bureaucracy, which actually is the one really running the country, but we can't hold them accountable. And of course, you know, the finishing school of the sort of universities these people went to, I'm not saying they're all leftists, but it just, you know, we now are sort of engulfed in a quagmire of almost sort of, you know, like communist level bureaucracy that is completely intransigent, it seems. That was Stuart. Let's now listen to Tim.
Hi Alex, Tim in Halifax, enjoying your show as usual, talking about DEI, and it's use the word fairness and equality a lot. Recently I applied for a job with the council. I was given an interview. I had years and years of experience. I'm 60 years old, I've been doing the similar things for years. All the qualifications, got an interview, was invited for interview. So I went back and looked just to gen up, getting ready for my interview, and it said that certain groups will be considered before me. How is that fair and equitable? Needless to say, I didn't bother going for the interview. I want to be judged on my merits, not on my skin colour or my ethnicity. Have a good day.
Yeah, I think
DEI is nonsense.
DEI is nonsense. It's not just nonsense, it's actually destructive, it's evil, it's unfair, and it is basically baked in racism. Rather than the Martin Luther King vision of judging nobody by the colour of their skin, it's exactly what it does. That was Tim in Halifax. I love Halifax. Do you know, I went to Halifax a while ago with my other half, and we had a jolly old time. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, amazing buildings. And we found a really cool little bar selling some pretty extraordinary craft beers and really rather enjoyed ourselves. I didn't know Halifax before, but I'd recommend it. Right, now let's have a call, shall we, and speak to Paul, who's in Portsmouth. Hi there, Paul.
Hello there, Alex. About cannabis, or skunk as it should be known nowadays, it's not like the cannabis of old that came from Morocco or places like that. This is to cut down tobacco use in Britain. They've used the price mechanism. They've boosted the price up. But nearly all this skunk now is grown in Britain, under lights, in people's lofts or whatever, or even on an industrial scale in old factories and whatever. If they crack down on that and push the price up, they push the use of it down. But they don't seem to really take any great interest in. They must know where this, local people must know where this stuff is being grown, mustn't they?
Well, I don't know if necessarily they do, but police have sort of helicopters with infrared cameras that they can sort of hover over and look for sort of roofs that glow bright white at night time and think, something funny's going on here. But, you know, the way I see it, and I don't know if you agree, when I look at places that have legalised cannabis by and large, so look at Amsterdam in the Netherlands, rather than actually it making it safe and, you know, taxable and weaker, and therefore people aren't having the mad stuff that makes them go doolally, what it seems to do is encourage far more extreme forms of cannabis to be manufactured and sold. And then off the back of that, because people might be going over there to have a jolly good time puffing on a peace pipe and seeing a hooker or two, it actually attracts even more criminality. People who say, oh, well, you know, had a little spliff, did you? Fancy jacking up with heroin at the same time? You know, and all these sort of legalised brothels are just essentially decriminalising trafficking of vulnerable women. It has the opposite effect.
I went to Amsterdam. I thought it was like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well, it is. It's lovely parts of Amsterdam. I mean, it's not all like that. But I don't think that sort of legalising something is suddenly the silver bullet in managing it. It seems to me, from places that have tried this, to go in the opposite direction.
I think they need to press down on where this stuff is being produced. It's not people growing just enough for themselves in their loft anymore. It's being produced on an industrial scale. There's so much of it about. And you can tell that by how the price of it has fallen. It's cheaper now than buying a packet of cigarettes. So,
well, but what about, I think social media has a big part to play in all of this, because people don't just, it's not like you go, billeting a community, sticking your poster up on the wall, want to buy weed, message this number on WhatsApp. A lot of a lot of drug dealers are actively promoting their wares via social media platforms, it's very easy. You can go on Instagram right now and, you know, look up a word like, I don't know, gummies or something, and probably find someone saying, if you want to buy such and such a product, contact me on this number, or contact me in DMs, or follow this account. And you think to yourself, if this was a physical shop, although in this day and age it kind of is happening in physical shops, it'd be shut down.
Yeah, but if they legalised it, the legal stores would only sell the weaker varieties. And where would they grow it? You know, would they have some huge greenhouses somewhere and grow it legally? But they'd grow weaker strains, and people would want the stronger stuff.
Well, you know, there is a gateway effect for sure. Paul in Portsmouth, thank you very much for your call there. Now, we had some breaking news a bit earlier. Paul Doyle, 53, has been remanded in custody after appearing at Liverpool Magistrates Court, charged with 7 offences related to the Liverpool Victory Parade crash. So there you go. Paul Doyle, 53, now remanded in custody and charged with 7 offences related to that car going into the crowds during the Liverpool Victory Parade. Going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. Stick on the kettle. Come right back, because I'm going to be joined by my old telly husband, Kev O'Sullivan, to snarl at the headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. I can't believe it's already 12 o'clock. Time has been flying by, hasn't it? We've been having some fun. Keep your thoughts coming in, because I always like to read your ideas on things. Do you know, and this is a true story, okay, right, this is a true story. I gave a call to a senior politician the other day, who's a good friend of mine. I think you can probably guess who, because I read in the newspaper that they were going to announce a policy, and I said, hey, if you want to know what the listeners of Talk think, this is it. So, you know, when I get your opinions, sometimes they are shared in very interesting ways, because you are a great litmus test, actually, of what people who vote certain ways or listen to this station and might share the opinions of many of its presenters actually think on certain key issues. It's fascinating. It's like having a sort of permanent focus group out there that we can sort of test the mood of the nation and see what you think about some of the decisions, the acts of government, projections of parties, policies, the lot of it basically it's democracy in action, and we all have a bit of democracy, don't we? Not enough of it going about the place, in my opinion. So why don't you be part of that and give me a call? 03444 99 1000. That is your normal network rate. You can also use that to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp that we can all share together. 8722 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before you write your message, and I'm on X at talkTV. Now, let us now be joined by my former television husband. There was no acrimonious divorce. Instead, we miss each other so much that we invite each other onto each other's shows and pretend it's the good old days. It's Mr. Kev O'Sullivan. Hello there, Kev. Good afternoon.
Yeah, the good old days are back. You and me together. Miss you still.
Let's Kev and Alex all over this stuff, shall we? So first of all, I just got to ask you about that ridiculous press conference yesterday. If you were advising Sir Keir Starmer, would you be like, mate, you know that Nigel Farage is absolutely knuckle dusting you up in the red wall, that no one likes you and much prefer him? How about you just do a big press conference all about him? That'll work.
What did he say? He mentioned Nigel Farage 12 times. 12 times. I hate this expression, but it is apposite. Nigel Farage is living rent-free in Keir Starmer's head. He is terrified. This government, with, 470 MPs, 250 majority, is quaking in its boots about a party with 5 MPs. Reform is rising, and Starmer is absolutely petrified. And can I just say one thing? I said this on my show last night in a state of characteristic rage. The Tories and Labour, after Nigel Farage made his speech the other day about, I'm going to give some tax breaks for young couples, married couples, so we can do something about the birth rate. I will restore the winter fuel allowance. I'll raise the minimum tax rate to £20,000. All very generous, pretty sensible political offers that will be popular. So the other parties, they hate that. So they all go, yeah, what, it's fantasy politics. He hasn't costed this out. He's just plucking these figures out. How is he going to pay for this? Listen to the speech that he made. He began the speech by saying, this is how I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to save £40 billion, cancelling Ed Miliband's net zero maniac claptrap. I'm going to cancel all DEI, which costs us, and I think this is a conservative estimate, about £20 billion a year. I'm going to stop the migrants. Therefore, we won't be spending 10, 11, 12, 15 billion pounds a year on asylum seekers. There you go. Right off the bat, that's about 70, 80 billion pounds.
Even cancelling net zero, right? Even that seems to be an underestimate, because at the crux of all of this, if you get rid of all that tree-hugging, wokery, Beauvais farting cows, blocking sunshine, mad Ed with his ukulele into the middle of some sort of stolen farmer's field covered in Chinese silicon. If you actually got rid of all that stuff and we actually got some fossil fuels out that we own, we could actually bring down energy bills, which would bring down the cost of everything. Guess what? Hospitals would be cheaper to run. The police service would be cheaper to run. Everything would be cheaper to run. What life would be cheaper to run? And so actually the real savings from net zero go way beyond just the cost that is being sort of handed out basically to Beijing in a big charity check to buy windmills and solar panels.
Couldn't agree more. But the point is, the whole backbone, the bedrock of Nigel Farage's speech was, I'm going to make all these tax breaks. I'm going to be very, very generous to the public. I'm going to encourage the birth rate. And here's how I'm going to pay for it. He then said, cancel net zero, cancel DEI, solve the migrant crisis. The other parties, Starmer, all of his speech yesterday, Badenoch's the same. How are you going to pay for this? Because they cannot even face the truth of what he said, because they are both insanely committed to pouring billions and billions and billions of pounds down the green diversity drain. And when you say, we're going to close that drain, we're not going to do it anymore, they go like this. La, 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 la. They cannot face truth. So don't listen to all this nonsense, fantasy politics. How's he going to pay for it? He told us.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
And then what's going to happen is they're all going to turn around and go, he's dangerous, he's evil, all this. And people are like, no, I tell you what is dangerous and evil, allowing terrorists to come over the channel on small boats. Do you know what is dangerous and evil? Making sure that Mrs. Miggins don't live to see her 88th birthday because she can't put the heating on. Do you know what is dangerous and evil? Telling everybody to judge everybody else by the colour of their skin. I mean, it's just the public have woken up. The scales have fallen from their eyes and they're looking at the uni party as dangerous and evil. But who on earth recommended to that robot Starmer that actually trying to take on Nigel in a head-to-head was a good idea? Because let's be fair, I think Starmer's a bright man. I don't think an absolute dunce becomes, you know, head of public prosecutions. But he's got no charisma. He ain't political.
He's a lawyer.
Right.
He passes exams.
He's got no savvy. He's got no political nous. And he's got no personality.
I think he's dim as hell. Even The Guardian, in that embarrassment yesterday, even The Guardian turned on him and said, you know, how is it? It was a brilliant question from The Guardian, of all papers, at his disastrous conference and speech yesterday. He said, how is it, Sakir, that the public school educated city multimillionaire from the upper classes, Nigel Farage, is able to communicate so brilliantly with the working classes, with the people of this country, particularly the working classes, whereas you, a self-avowed working class son of a working class father who was a tool maker, did he mention that? And his mother, an NHS nurse. How is it that you, a working class person, haven't got a clue how to communicate with the working classes? You know, now Starmer's, well, I wouldn't accept that necessarily. You know, I mean, it
didn't even answer the question. I mean, didn't answer any question. He never. Shall we have a little look? Because those the slew of questions shoved at Starmer. I mean, it backfired. It was actually sort of delightfully cringeworthy. Let's have a little look at a cheeky little montage.
Do you think one of the problems is that Nigel Farage can approximate talking like a human being, where you just resort to talking points and dodging questions?
The speed of the decline in your popularity is historically unprecedented. Isn't this speech today an admission that you have failed and Nigel Farage understands voters better than you?
Nigel Farage has 5 MPs, you've got 403. Are you panicking because Reform is so far ahead in the polls, it seems? Is he living rent-free in your brain? You went to a state school, your dad worked in a factory, your mum worked in the NHS. So why has a public school-educated former city trader got more in common with the Red Wall than you have?
Reform UK say you're running scared of them, that you're sounding increasingly like them with some of the policies and announcements you've made recently. This is a speech that was very defensive, wasn't it? Are you not worried people will ask why you're holding a press conference about Nigel Farage 4 years out from a general election instead of focusing on your plans for the country?
You went into the election promising to freeze national insurance and keep the two-child benefit cap. You've since raised national insurance on businesses and now you're considering axing the cap. Isn't attacking Nigel Farage's economic credibility a bit rich?
I mean, on some level, Kev, you actually got to feel a bit sorry for the man, don't you?
I did a bit then, but you know what it was like? It was like you'd expect that as those questions, those barrage of humiliating questions were coming, he starts to sparks coming out of his Starmer bot malfunction. You know, the guy is out of his depths. He's a robot. And those questions, they didn't come from nowhere. There was a reason for them. And if the brilliant Labour strategists, we're told, who pull his string, old Boaty McBoatface or whatever his name is, that McSweeney character, if he's such a genius, he needs to address this. And he needs to get going with this guy, because Boaty McBoatface, brilliant strategist, very clever man. Well, Boaty, you're doing a completely useless job.
Right. It's a bit like saying this person's a brilliant orator who's just had a press conference absolutely pasting you. The worst thing you could do is turn around and go, I'm going to try and beat him. No, you can't. Do you know, I said earlier, I don't know if anyone remembers sort of 90s Mario games, but when you go into the castle in a Mario game and you've got all the ghosts flying around, if you don't want the ghost to come after you, you have to turn and look the opposite direction. Look at the ghost and the ghost appears. And this is the whole thing. Starmer is obsessed now with the spectre of Farage and can't keep his name out of his mouth. And I just think this is totally the wrong approach, you absolute bonehead. Why on earth would you do that? You don't give your enemy a bigger platform by banging on about your enemy every 5 seconds. It's mad. Like they say in Italy, stop poking the turd.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That yesterday, that was a strategic nightmare, a complete mistake. And if anyone had any doubts whatsoever that reform are on the rise in a major way, and that Nigel Farage is standing an increasing chance of becoming our next Prime Minister, I give you yesterday. Yesterday, that became even more of a reality than it was before. What a balls up by Keir Starmer. This guy just stumbles from disaster to catastrophe. He is an absolute mess, a failure, a catastrophe, and boy, oh boy, it can only get worse. It's terrible.
I'm gonna nick the name Boaty McBoatface for Morgan McSweeney. I love that. Boaty! I mean, it wasn't bad. I wonder if his head's rolled. I wonder if he's in the naughty corner this morning. Now, talking about the naughty corner, I always like it when the left wing self-cannibalises. And the BBC, their older Springwatch, which is usually fronted by Chris Packham, a man who has never met a woke cause he didn't like, has come under fire because in going around filming all the loveliness of nature, all of the sort of witchetty grubs and the, you know, rutting stags and the ancient oak trees and all the sort of flora and fauna that is constantly bemoan is being eradicated from our countryside, they decided to hurl in a load of giant HGVs and paper over a wildflower field in order to set up their cameras. And the locals have gone, what are you doing? You're trashing the joint.
It's a place called the Longshore Estate. It's in the Peak District. It's a National Trust site. So this is where they did their special 20th anniversary Springwatch from Chris Packham and Michaela Strachan, his co-host. And in order to facilitate this special anniversary show, they didn't paper it. They steel plated over a beautiful field. They filled the entire area with limestone, temporary limestone roads, which ruins the nature of the earth. Apparently hares, owls, birds, wildlife, all the beautiful flowers around there, totally ruined. So there you go. That's television for you. Here we are. We're lovely people. We love the countryside. By the way, if you look behind the cameras, we've completely destroyed the countryside. Of course, the BBC has announced, you know, we are apply to the standards of the BAFTA nature broadcasting guidelines or something like that. I mean, come on, stop destroying the countryside. And I don't know, this is just me, you know me, I'm the chink in my tough guy armor is I'm a bit of a sort of hopeless animal lover, but weirdly I've always found these wildlife programs, even Attenborough's programs, but especially Springwatch, utterly, completely unwatchable, so tedious they hurt. So, Springwatch, another example of epic BBC hypocrisy. We're promoting the countryside. Meanwhile, we're destroying it.
It's drive over a lot of it. Oh no, there's a curlew's nest, squish. I mean, some might say you're an animal lover because you yourself are a bit of an animal. Let's talk now about the civil service.
I hate humans.
I know you hate humans. Somehow you managed to get a little soft spot in your heart for me, at least got some way.
True.
Some way there.
You're the other chink in my armour. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, some might say I'm an animal as well. Let's talk now about the civil service. 27 million quid on DEI. I had the head of the FGA, what's that union called now? No, there's something new. The Civil Service Union, whatever, the FDA, that's it, I was right. FDA Union, come on and sort of bemoan the fact that we're saying the civil service is spending 27 million on DEI initiatives. He's like, yeah, that's coins down the back of the sofa. What would you rather have? A civil service that cares about racism and opportunity and equity, or one that doesn't? And I'm like, actually, probably one that doesn't. 27 million quid might be coins down the back of the sofa when it comes to sort of, the size of the civil service, 500,000 employees, which has fallen by 150,000 in under 10 years. But normally when you get these figures of 27 million, some wise egg newspaper has done the calculations of how many doctors and nurses that's worth. And at the end of the day, this is being wasted on stuff that actually makes everybody turn into loony racists.
Well, this is what Farage is talking about. If you can do a Donald Trump, that magnificent, with one fell swoop, cancelling all diversity, all DEI. Along the way, he also cancelled net zero projects. But if you can just cancel all DEI, it's not just in the civil service. Think about the NHS. Think about all the other public sector places where DEI is like an infestation, a saturation. The money you'll save will be phenomenal. £27 million, it sounds to me quite a light fee. Do you know, for example, the Ministry of Defence has got, I think it's 60 people, 60 diversity officers, and they cost something like £4 million every single year. And they call themselves Protecting the Protectors. Now, why are there 60 diversity officers in the Ministry of Defence? Now, last time I looked, the Ministry of Defence has got quite an important job defending the realm. Defending this country. They should be spending every penny on that extremely crucial mission, not wasting 27 million quid on DEI claptrap. We are consumed in this country, and this is what I think Reform are promising. They're promising a return to common sense. In this country, and this story you're talking about proves it, we have come to be ruled by a sort of class who prioritize their own virtue signaling, be kind, diversity, net zero, over the practical realities of running the country properly. So they go, oh, it's much more important we spend £27 million on DEI than tanks, than aircraft, than running the country properly. You see what I'm saying? This is where this country is going wrong. We need to get the power out of the hands of these idiots like Miliband, who thinks his own virtue signalling, his own halo polishing is far more important than the British economy, which he's single-handedly sending to hell in a handcart.
He really is. It is extraordinary. I just don't think it's like these people think that their manifesto is destroy Britain.
Yeah. There's no. What we're looking at here, this DEI and this green claptrap, this is the death of common sense. The great thing about this country used to be that its backbone was common sense. We were a sensible country, which is why we've always been so successful. Now we've turned into a madhouse run by people like that absolute moron, Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, who can't stand this country and now thinks that all of us who maybe don't think the ECHR is a good idea are Nazis. Hey, Herman.
Oh, Kev, mate, you'll love it.
Herman, go to hell.
I did some homework. I love that. I did homework, I was going to say. I did some homework is what I'm going to call it, because I did some digging down into Herman. You're going to like some of this.
Run through it again.
Oh, you're going to love this. Right, so he's the very first Attorney General in over 100 years to have not been in politics. That's because he was just Starmer's woke mate when they were barristers together. He also used to donate to Sir Keir Starmer's political campaign. So it's a bit like me becoming Prime Minister and going to, like, the person who funded my campaign, who I happen to know since I was, like, 25 years old. And, like, do you want a job? Here you go. Here's the most important job in the country. But the problem is, he's there as Attorney General, basically representing the government, when everything he's ever done before in his legal career is challenging the government, using taxpayers' money to basically head up the legal anti-Project Britain. He's the one who gave away the Chagos Islands. He was advising Caribbean nations on how they can go about pushing for slavery reparations. He defended Gerry Adams. He called Just Stop Oil inspiring. He said all education secretaries should study the histories and evil of British colonialism. Therefore, that will change the way they want the curriculum to look. That's right, you can't bash Britain enough. He hates British exceptionalism. In fact, the only way he thinks Britain is exceptional is the fact that it must be exceptionally evil and prevented from existing at all costs. He defended Al-Qaeda terrorists. He wants Shamima Begum to come home. He also oversaw, of course, the judge judification of the prosecution of rioters, which sees people like Lucy Connolly in prison. So this guy, literally, if you were to play woke bingo of dangerous leftist, extreme Marxist viewpoints, you've got a full house. Yeah, and he's the Attorney General.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Alex, he's a child. He's an infant. He's a juvenile. He's never really left the sixth form debating society. This is ridiculous. This man, you know, this sort of childlike, anti-colonialism. If Britain has any territory, we must give it back. We must get rid of it. It is the politics of the sixth form. He's never grown up. And the fact that he is now the most powerful legal entity in this country is frightening. And when he turns around and calls you, me, everybody, it's not about people in reform. Millions of people in this country know that we have to leave the ECHR. It's an insanity to be in that.
Right, so do 9 other countries in Europe who must all be Nazis then.
And he calls us Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, that is pathetic, juvenile, and the stupidity of that statement is frightening, given that it comes from the man who is supposed to be our premier legal brain. He hasn't even got a brain. What an idiot. What an idiot. It's terrifying that he has so much power, that fool on the Westminster Hill, Keir Starmer, gave him all this power. We are in the hands of childish, left-wing, juvenile infants. It's a real problem.
Oh, couldn't agree more. Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan, ladies and gentlemen. I'll leave my homework here if you like, Kev. I just need that on the desk. Yeah, it's good. My little bullet points. Thank you to TfL providing Wi-Fi on the Jubilee line. Managed to do that, didn't I? Useful. Right, going to take a short break now, but when we come back, a rather sad story. A farmer, 78 years old, has killed himself. Basically, completely due to the inheritance tax raid. That is not my words. Those are the words of a coroner, as his distraught children urged the Labour Party to ditch that hated policy before there are more deaths. We're discussing that after this.
Sometimes you've got to get out of a suit, get out of Westminster, frankly.
It's just his father who was a working people, and his father worked in a factory 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, but he doesn't actually know that. He just knows what his father did. I mean, it's all mixed up, isn't it?
It's a bit strange, and also that's the wrong way to attack Nigel Farage, because, I mean, whatever the reality, most voters think that Sir Keir Starmer, KC, is quite posh, and they think that Nigel Farage is a man of the people. I mean,
exactly. And that's sort of it's baked in, if you want. I hate that
well,
phrase,
exactly. So there's no point. There's no point.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the programme. A very sad story here. This is the story of John Charlesworth, who was 78 years old. He'd been a farmer all of his working life, a keen church bell ringer. He was found dead at his farm in Silkstone, in Barnsley, in South Yorkshire, the day before Rachel Reeves' budget. Now, there's been an inquest into his suicide, and coroner Tanika Rawdon said he had caring responsibilities and was worried about the implementation of the new form of inheritance tax, which could see the family lose 50% of their farm, ultimately causing him to take his life the day before the changes were announced. His daughter Verity Charlesworth, who's 45, urged the government to rethink the inheritance tax raid, saying it's not too late to change before someone else loses their life, like my dad. Let's speak now to Gareth Wynne-Jones, who is himself a farmer. I mean, Gareth, this is a really tragic story, and it's not a unique circumstance, is it? There are farmers who have farmed all their lives, who run family farms up and down the country, incredibly worried about essentially having to break up and sell off their farm, not being able to pass it down the younger generations because of this onerous policy.
Very, very sad. You know, I know the story about this family. I've spoken to Jonathan as well. He's been very strong, and so the whole family. And hopefully there's been a little bit of closure after yesterday's inquiry. And as we can see, the coroner was very, very strong with the words about the whole situation. This government does have blood on its hands, and Keir Starmer promised in the NFU conference before he came into power he would protect family farms, and the first thing that they did was give a devastating bombshell with inheritance tax. And Rachel Reeves and the Treasury didn't do their sums. They said it was going to be a small minority, it was going to be affected. We're looking at 70-80% of family farms across the UK that are going to be hit by this. And it's an industry already on its knees, squashed with government legislation, crushed by the supermarkets and their prices, and an ever changing weather system, which again adds pressure. And that's why there is a high suicide rate in the farming industry. That's why a lot of people feel low, feel depressed, feel we're not appreciated. And however you look at it, you might need a lawyer, a solicitor, a dentist, a doctor, a policeman once, twice or three times a year. You're going to need a farmer once, twice or three times a day. And governments are really forgetting about what we do for this country and what we're trying to do for this country, which is keep food affordable and keep people fed healthily. And the day they wake up, it'll be too late. There'll be nobody there to produce this food. And we're seeing supermarkets bringing in Asda, for one, bringing in beef from Uruguay now. We've got Morrison's bringing New Zealand lamb, again putting more pressure on the livestock industry and the farmers who are trying to make a living and trying to feed people affordably.
I mean, there's a very high suicide rates in farming in general. I don't think many members of the public really appreciate that because of what you're describing, the extremely small margins, the unpredictability year upon year of what your output is going to be, the strenuously long hours. What does a government need to do if it's going to listen to farmers? Because one thing I've noticed is this government are very lackadaisical about, farmers giving up their land, covering the countryside in solar panels. When you look at the approach of other countries, so China, for example, one of the West's greatest adversaries, is having a massive campaign, propaganda everywhere, encouraging people to go into farming because they want to be 100% self-sufficient in agriculture. And we're now at a rate, I think, of about 60% self-sufficient, which is similar to where we found ourselves at the outbreak of the Second World War, which what you see when there's disruption in supply chains is you can plunge your country into devastation pretty quickly. We had to have dig for victory. We had to have rationing going all the way through into the 1950s as a result of this. And I just think it is mental. The first thing a country should be looking at doing is making sure it can produce its own energy and feed itself, because that actually directly affects whether people can live or die. And yet this government seems to be happy to just ride roughshod over farming, an industry that's already under great pressures and great strain. What is it that a government, if it was in listening mode, if it said, right, we actually need to boost the agricultural sector, not keep penalising it, what should they be doing?
Well, number one would be scrap inheritance tax. I'll just go back because I agree on the majority of your points. One thing I'm going to go back on, because I think it's really important, is, you know, I've got a big social media following, and I have to say the general public have been very, very supportive about this. And we cannot forget, you know, they're the consumers, they're the customers that we're trying to, and they are being supportive, and they are beginning to turn their back on this government and the previous governments as well, you know. And this is important. You know, we've got to start thinking about building a better Britain on our bellies. So we start with food security, and you're 100% right. You know, we've seen food shortages, we've seen rations, and we are sleepwalking into them again. We are sleepwalking into them again. And there is going to be a global food shortages. You know, we've got a growing population in the world. So we need to make sure there's enough food being produced in the UK to be self-sufficient. And what is government doing? Taking away them powers from us. You know, giving companies into Wales, for instance, to buy land so they can offset their carbon by growing trees. Solar panels then, solar farms. Look, I'm not against trees, I'm not against solar panels. Solar panels on roofs, solar panels on land that's not productive for food production. We're a small island with a growing population. For God's sake, if we're not going to be protecting that land, every inch we lose, we're going to have less room to grow food. And however you look at it, we're flipping good at what we do. We're very, very good at what we do. We've had, well, my family's had 375 years of experience on the same land doing what we do.
Right.
So we have to make sure we protect these family farms, as in working farms, from this inheritance tax, making sure we keep people fed affordably, healthily and sustainably.
I couldn't agree more. Some of the highest standards in agriculture in the world as well. Brilliant pastoral traditional ways of farming, not mass intensive, chuck them all in some giant aircraft hangar and feed them weird stuff. Let's speak now to Norman in Leicestershire. Hello, Norman. Good afternoon.
Hello, Julia. How are you doing?
Oh, it's Alex, but never mind. I'm very well. I don't mind being called Julia. She's a great woman. That's all right.
Sorry. I've just been listening to the and as I said to the guy that answered the phone, in the First World War, this country could not feed itself. The Second World War, it was even worse. What we have now is this government, if you can call it that, seem intent on destroying the farming industry in this country, and we will live to regret it in years to come. We'll live to regret it.
Well, that's exactly what I say, because, you know, people sort of think, well, it's fine, you know, we can import all this stuff from outside. That's OK. We live in a globalised world. It's really easy flying in green beans from Kenya or oranges from wherever it may be, Israel. That's dead simple. Well, actually, it's not, because no one predicts when war's going to come. We all know that we saw, actually, the outbreak of the invasion of Ukraine, exactly what Russia was doing, preventing grain supplies, fertiliser and cooking oils coming out of the country, which plunged the globe, the entire world, into inflation. African countries, and this wasn't really reported on, but African countries single-handedly depended on that fertiliser and that grain to try and avoid mass starvation. And Russia was able to wargame it, which is why they want to take over ports like Odessa. It's why they took over Crimea, because they want to control those maritime routes. Same with the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. If we allow farming to just be decimated, no one knows when there's going to be disruption to a supply chain. We saw it with COVID as well. And if you can't feed yourself and your country, if you can't make sure the lights stay turned on and constantly rely on the basics for living on other countries, you could find yourself very rapidly wanting. It is reckless, it is feckless, it is dangerous. Norman, thank you ever so much. Thank you as well to Gareth Wyn-Jones there, talking about this tragedy that's happened within the farming community. And listen, if anyone out there is having struggles, if anyone out there just thinks everything feels a bit hopeless and you need somewhere to turn, then you can actually come to us. You can go to talk.tv/helplines. talk.tv/helplines, and that will hopefully redirect you to where you can find support. No one should suffer alone. OK, then we're going to take a short break now. But when I come back, we're going to be talking about migration, yet another ridiculous non-deportation story where a Pakistani drug dealer has been allowed to stay in Britain so he can teach his son about Islam. Surely he'd be able to do that better in Pakistan. We're discussing that after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So, Mohammed Asif Karim, 43 years old, is a man who has amassed no fewer than 21 offences after arriving on a visa to visit the UK. Visit! In 1988 and never going home. I mean, just overstaying your tourist visa is enough for you to be deported, in my opinion. But oh no, never mind. He committed 21 offences, was jailed for 4 years for possession of heroin and cocaine with intent to supply. But he was allowed to remain because he became a prosecution witness in a murder trial. I'm sure he's got some pretty tasty friends if he's operating in the drugs underworld. But he was then kicked out of the witness protection scheme when he continued to offend. 10 years ago, he was supposed to be deported to Pakistan. 10 years ago. And he only sees his son, which happens to be by a British mother, twice a month. But still, a judge in Edinburgh has ruled he can stay in the UK because he's the one who taught his son about religion and culture and life and upbringing in Pakistan. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Let's speak to Dr. Mike Jones, who is a scientist and migration expert. Mike, thank you for coming on the programme. Every day we hear of another mad situation where someone has not been deported for some not just spurious grounds, but things that actually seem to go against common sense. This guy is a prolific offender. He should have been deported for outstaying his welcome back in 1988. And now the argument is if he goes back to Pakistan, he can't teach his son about Islam. Make this make sense to me.
Well, it doesn't make any sense because the legal system, the asylum system, is not aligned to common sense. Why? Because we have a common law system that gives massive discretion to judges, and we have the Human Rights Act. And the Human Rights Act embeds the European Convention of Human Rights into British law, and those rights are very vaguely worded. And over many decades, you've basically had a critical mass of activist judges, activist lawyers, and laws that can be interpreted in a number of ways. And obviously, they interpret them in a way that allows revolting scumbags like this man to stay in the country. But it's been like that for a long time. I think to the media's credit, they have cottoned onto this. We are exposing more and more cases like this. But it's been like that for a long time. In this particular example, it was Article 8 of the ECHR that was invoked. You know, he's an illegal immigrant, a criminal, but he'd been in the UK for a very long time. You know, he had a family, and the judges cited very spurious reasons around mental health and cultural teaching and religious teaching and so on. But that's what happens. It's happened time and time again. And until you reform the legal system, it's going to continue like this.
It's the only way to do that, essentially, to leave the ECHR, because we've now got a situation where 9 EU member states are pushing to disapply certain articles of the European Convention of Human Rights, pointing to these issues of an encroachment upon sovereignty, preventing countries from making decisions in their national interest, because a court of unelected judges in Strasbourg, who want to do things by the letter of the law, see things very differently and seem to wield a ridiculous amount of power. But the problem is, when it comes to the canon of case history and legal precedents, is it possible to simply say, well, you know, we can just reform it or disapply this or that? Or do you have to just eject yourself from the entire thing?
Well, ideally, you just eject yourself. But, what does the phrase leave the ECHR actually mean? It's become a sort of popular political nostrum. I mean, there are two stages to it. The first is you either abolish the Human Rights Act, you disapply it, or, you disapply it to immigration law. But ideally, you'd get rid of it, and then you'd leave the Council of Europe. You would leave the Council of Europe, which means we're not party to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights, which is in Strasbourg. But one thing I should point out here is that getting rid or disapplying the Human Rights Act is the most fundamental thing you need to do, because British judges are more zealous and more crazy in applying the ECHR to various cases than foreign judges. I mean, I don't like the Strasbourg Court at all. I don't like the European Court of Human Rights, but even they would balk at some of the judgments made here in the UK. And the reason activist judges can make these judgments here is because we don't have the Human Rights Act. So it's a sort of two-pronged strategy.
It's such a tough sell, isn't it? Because, look, I agree with everything you're saying. We need a Great Repeal Act. We've got to pull out at the roots the Human Rights Act, which doesn't protect normal human rights. Criminal law does that, largely speaking. It seems to operate as a loophole system for ne'er-do-wells and chancers and activist judges, like you said, doing everything by crossing every T and dotting every I, even if it's not in the national interest. But it's a pretty hard sell, unfortunately, because people think, getting rid of the Human Rights Act and pulling out of the European Convention of Human Rights is basically, I don't know, bringing back capital punishment and sticking kids up chimneys. I don't know why we don't have enough faith in ourselves that we're a good and a decent country that would never do awful things and therefore don't need to be straitjacketed by this overbearing foreign judicial system. Let's talk now about the fact that it's ridiculous. Foreign lorry drivers are having to plaster their vans and their trucks with big stickers saying, we're not going to the UK. Such is the rate of people trying to sneak aboard HGVs to get into Britain. We often talk about, don't we, the small boats crisis. We are not so cognizant of the number of people who are actually breaking into the country by getting on board vehicles, be they Mrs. Miggins' camper van or, Pietra's, truck from Latvia. But the problem is that this is pretty commonplace, isn't it? If foreign truck drivers are having to say, look, we're not going to Britain, don't even bother breaking into this vehicle. I want to know how many people are breaking into vehicles.
Yeah, we don't know the exact numbers, but they're pretty large. I mean, when people talk about illegal immigration, they think of, the child migrant crisis, the small boats, the asylum hotels, the protests, the benefit system, and so on and so forth. But in reality, historically and traditionally, people have come in through the English Channel, the Channel Tunnel, via larger vehicles, or they've tried their luck through ferry ports. And a lot of people are still trying this. And they don't just board, lorries and larger vehicles in France. They board them in Belgium and in some cases the Netherlands. And, this story with people, putting bumper stickers, we're not headed to the UK. It's actually a very rational thing for the lorry drivers to do because some of the illegal migrant operations are not that sophisticated, particularly if they're not involved with the gangs. They'll just go for soft-shelled vehicles. They'll try and, use a Stanley knife to get their way in. And, often they get it wrong. They'll get into a vehicle that's going in the opposite direction. But the lorry drivers, they want to protect themselves, because if they're stopped with illegal immigrants in their vehicles, they're going to get questioned. The authorities are going to say, well, were you in cahoots with the smuggling gang? That'd be an obvious question. Or, they could say, did you follow the regulations? You talked about dotting your T's and I's. They could say, did you properly secure your vehicles when you were going for a break? So it makes a lot of sense for them to put these bumper stickers there. It's morbidly funny in one way, but as you say, it suggests that there's one-way traffic here in terms of illegal immigration. A lot of these people are trying to get to the UK, not just via the small boats across the English Channel, but through larger vehicles. And a lot of illegal immigrants in the UK actually overstay their visas. That's never talked about.
Right. Well, there we go. Our Pakistani friend here, the drug dealer, 21 offences, has overstayed his visa by almost 30 years. I mean, it makes a mockery of our system. We should be able to... We give millions in aid to Pakistan, a country which would rather, lob bricks at its neighbour in the form of India. And we give them millions of pounds and we can't even deport criminals back there. It's ridiculous. Dr. Mike Jones, thank you ever so much. Now, before we wrap up for the day, it's your opportunity to throw in your 2-bit, because after the break it's going to be your calls, your messages. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial if you'd like to speak to me. I'd love that. Normal network rates and all that. 03444 99 1000 is also the number if you'd like to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note. 87222 is the number to text. Right, talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back and looking forward to hearing from you after this.
Just his father who was a working people, and his father worked in a factory 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, but he doesn't actually know that. He just knows what his father did. I mean, it's all mixed up, isn't it?
It's a bit strange, and also that's the wrong way to attack Nigel Farage, because whatever the reality, most voters think that Sir Keir Starmer KC is quite posh, and they think that Nigel Farage is a man of the people. I mean,
exactly. That's sort of it's baked in, if you want. But I hate that phrase,
exactly. So there's no point taking that on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Let us hit up the phone lines because it's that time of day. Let's speak to Steve, who's in Leeds. Hello there, good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So on this poor farmer that's taken his own life, you may remember, Alex, because you spoke about this, 2 years ago in 2023, Ruth Perry, a head teacher, took her own life on the back of an Ofsted report.
Yeah.
At that time, Ofsted reports were then cancelled, all inspections were cancelled. I remember it being in the paper for about a week. I remember the Labour Party accusing the government of causing her death, and Amanda Spielman, the head of Ofsted, had to make a public apology for the actions of Ofsted in causing her death. Well, can we see Rachel Reeves doing the same? Can we see the opposition claiming that the government has caused her death by their actions? Is it in the national papers? Maybe it's because farmers are seen as right-wing fascists and teachers are seen as left-wing heroes. But it just seems wrong to me that nobody's linked the two. 2023, a teacher killed herself and the inquest said it was because of Ofsted. 2025, a farmer kills himself because the inquest says it's because of Rachel Reeves' policy. The government, totally quiet.
You make a very important point because we constantly hear, maybe it's something to do with the unions, I don't know, but we constantly hear about how awful it is to be a teacher and that they don't get enough pay and the challenges of the classrooms. And yet farmers have some of the highest suicide rates. There are charities out there which are specifically set up to help prevent suicide in the agricultural sector because it's such a grueling and tough life with so many pressures pressures, so much unpredictability, such tight margins, so many strains, and it can be a lonely old business. And yet at the core of everything should be self-sufficiency in food supply, because when things go wrong, by gum, don't you need it? And you're right, Steve, it is a sort of two-tier morality, isn't it? Because they wear barber jackets and wellies and a sort of common sense, down-to-earth, salt-of-the-earth people, they don't get our sympathy because they're not out there supporting Gaza and complaining about how much oil we're drilling. And it makes me sick to the core. Steve,
well, the thing is, Alex, just quickly, right? I remember when Rachel Reeves was appointed Chancellor. Sir Keir Starmer said, look, at the first female Chancellor, all the women in the country, all the young girls celebrate the fact that she's become a female Chancellor. Well, she's just caused the death. So the first female Chancellor, the biggest act in office, apart from bankruptcy in the country, is to cause the death of a 70-year-old farmer. If I was a young girl, would I want to be Chancellor today?
Oh, do you know what? I hate all this. Oh, look, she's a female, isn't that great? I'm like, mate, we had Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister in the 80s. Get over it already. Yeah. Stephen Leeds, thank you ever so much for your thoughtful call. Let's have a little voice note now and listen to Ian.
Hi Alex, it's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about this two-child cap, and your guest said that he supports Farage on this because we're not having enough children. The problem is, it's not so much the benefit, it's the fact that the taxation system, the cost of having a child in this country is so high that actually people who work can't afford to have 2 children or 3 children because everything is so expensive. So what they really need to do is, if they want the population to have more kids, is actually relieve the tax burden on the blooming people who are working. It's not mind science, it's common sense, but all the parties historically, all they ever do is think about upping the taxation rates. How can we get more tax from people? Rather than saying, actually, how can we make working people's lives easier and better and don't penalise them so heavily?
Well, this is it. Ian is absolutely bang on there. It's not about living on handouts. I'll tell you what, as a woman of childbearing age, the thing that would concern me most if I was going to have a baby is, what do I do with the baby when I'm coming and sitting in this studio? It's the practicalities of it. Yes, it's the affordability, but you don't want to have to be sort of, paying through the nose for nurseries. And where is the nursery? Is it near the office? Can I drop the kid off there? What are the hours, etc.? And I don't understand why it needs to be, not common sense to say, hey, in workplaces, let's have creches. It's really simple. You need the working population to be having children. The working population who, in theory, can afford to have children. The working population who will motivate their kids through example, and be exactly the sort of people you want procreating. They need help in managing to balance the lot of it. And yet there's blimmin' no nursery places out there. You go to an office development and it's got a coffee cart and a breakout space and a basketball hoop so Derek from accounts can relive his misspent youth. And it's got a rooftop bar and it's got gym membership, and it might even throw in a bit of health insurance. But have a child? No, don't do that. No, don't try and continue the human race. That's a ridiculous idea. And then they turn around and go, oh, look, our birth rate's really low. Well, I wonder why. It's because every man, woman and child is out there striving, paying a load in taxes, paying a load in energy bills, and when they need to know where they're going to put their kids, there's no answers. It's very simple. Let's listen now to Sally.
Hi, Alex. Great show. I think Nigel is goading that awful man and seeing exactly what he will do. And yesterday was the first example. He is running scared. Why should he worry about Nigel? There's another 4 years to go before there's an election. Oh dear, it's going to be fun.
Well, I'll tell you why he should worry about Nigel. I think if he's looking at the polling, it probably keeps him awake at night because it ain't looking good. The last polling, I think, had Reform on about 31% of a predicted vote share, with the Labour Party 8 points behind that, and the Conservative Party dropped into 4th place. So he's got every reason to worry about Nigel Farage. But what I don't understand is, if I'm worried about something, I don't go around banging on about it until the cows come home. I sit there and think tactically, what can I do to sort the situation out? Solutions, rather than constantly pointing pointing at problems. And yet that isn't what Sir Keir Starmer's done. In fact, the word Nigel Farage comes out of his mouth more than the word far-right thug or, my dad was a tool maker. It's absolutely ludicrous, the approach, but it was comedy gold. I mean, you must have enjoyed a bit of that yesterday, Ian, Starmer's press conference with every single reference. Who said to him, do you know what, I think you should do a big press conference on Nigel Farage?
Yes, you with the 170 majority need to do a big press conference on a party that has 5 MPs. Now, that doesn't tell the full story, but from their perspective, that would normally be how you would approach it. You go, we don't even need to talk about these people. No, let's cobble together an entire press conference to respond. So fearful are we of what is going on out there, 4 years away from a general election. You can't make this stuff up.
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, if I really didn't like someone, if I had an arch nemesis, the last thing I'd want to do is spend an hour of my life talking about them to the general public.
100%. Nigel would have been sitting there in an old wind-backed leather chair with a big old stogie on the go and a nice glass of port, thinking this is exactly how I wanted it to pan out. And of course it has.
But also,
now,
you kind of think to yourself...
Kev is encroached now on the debate, of course.
Oh, I know, but they're all there sort of going, how do I talk human? I'm going to be... I remember this, actually, because, of course, I used to be head of media for UKIP, and I remember this back in sort of 2014, 2015, because Nigel genuinely does enjoy a fag and a pint and always believes that work should be enjoyable, otherwise, why the heck bother, life's too short? Because he's a bon vivant and he's a sensible man. And so we used to go about the place doing these tours, visiting town halls and walking up and down high streets, and he'd always say, right, get the journalists in, let's have a pint at the same time. Not because he wanted to sort of look a particular way. It wasn't. It's just what he does. The man can't get past 1 o'clock without a bitter.
But you see, Keir Starmer can't do that. Kemi Badenoch can't do that. Even I thought the generic thing of him going around the tube station, but I thought was really quite effective. Is something she couldn't do.
Quite funny though.
I mean, a lot of people went, it's a bit Partridge, but I didn't think it was Partridge.
No, it was though, wasn't it?
I didn't know. I honestly never occurred to me.
Excuse me, gents, you're pushing through the ticket barrier.
I've got a Partridge radar. Believe me, I can spot these swines all over the place. I thought it was the best thing Genric's ever done in his life.
I did like it.
But you're right. I mean, it is a little bit like, well, you can tell me to off as much as you like. There was a bit of that going on. But I just thought jumping all over Sadiq Khan's territory like that was just joyful in that respect.
But it's mad, actually, that, we aren't talking about that. It's ridiculous on the London Tube. You see it all the time, the ne'er-do-wells pushing through the ticket barriers and the high-vis people. What are the high-vis people? You may as well just get rid of them. They don't do anything.
Forget the ticket evasion. I've seen people, smash the barrier to get through, literally kick it to get through.